For all the expensive sets, CGI trees, ravishing worlds, and endless countries, this show is like being in a history class.
My history class didn't have CGI trees.
It's Tolkien, and he clearly doesn't understand that practical effects exist.
What we need is emotion, characters interacting and developing a story. What we got is actors reciting things about what they are about to do or what they should do, and it's absolutely boring.
Okay.
It's all so plastic and lush and glowing, I feel like I'm watching an advert for Shire Airlines.
Is he familiar with Lord of the Rings?
Is Shire Airlines a real airline?
It could be.
By sniffing around all the leftover pages of Tolkien's work and focusing only on world building, the showrunners forgot the essential. So we're just left with the most expensive Enya music video ever.
Oh, wow.
That is a 1-star review from IMDb. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is Spoilers Intended, a podcast about series and films. I'm Steven, joined as always by Andrew.
Hello.
And over there is Ryan.
I'm here with Galadriel in Numenor.
I tried. I couldn't remember the elven greeting. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it does exist.
What's up, dog?
Yo, how you been? So in
It's
case
been 100 years, Stephen.
That's
100 years.
That's nothing. I'm an elf.
So in case it isn't obvious, we are here to talk about Rings of Power Season 1.
It's actually Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power.
I'm not going that far. Rings of Power
That's the full
Season
name.
1. That's nice. That's good for them. I mean, we could just be like Amazon Prime's Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power
Jeff
Season
Bezos
1.
funded Rings of Power.
Yeah.
The funding is going to lead to some entertaining numbers.
Questions, yeah.
But before we get into all of that, we figured since this is a chance, an opportunity, I know for many out there, Lord of the Rings on the big screen was some people's first introduction to fantasy, right?
Mhm.
And this also could be someone's first introduction to fantasy. So I thought it would be interesting for us to talk about our first introductions to fantasy.
How we got started.
Yeah, what was our exposure? What led you down this path? And I really want to hear Andrew first because there have been many times when he has told me he does not care about people with swords and shields.
I don't like swords and boards.
Doesn't
I'm not a
like
big medieval
dragons.
fan. Well, hold on, wait a second. I like dragons.
He doesn't like dragons.
He's not a Durglin fan.
He doesn't like Dungeons and Dragons, and 50% of that is dragons. So
So oddly enough, I like fantasy.
Uh-huh.
I just don't like sword and board fantasy like Game of Thrones.
okay.
Basically,
So
I don't
what
like
fan-
medieval.
what fantasy do
So when you say
like?
sword and board, what does board stand for? What is
Shield.
that?
Shield.
Shields. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you meant
No.
like you're bored. Why?
Well, I mean, you
Like,
could,
that's
you
a-
could go that way.
What a burn. I've never heard that sword and board. Snooze fest.
So I honestly, my first experience into the fantasy realm was really The Hobbit. So Lord of the Rings, Tolkien.
Mm-hmm.
So the book.
Yeah, the book.
Okay.
The book. Okay.
Yeah, not The Hobbit.
I was
films.
concerned. I was like, how did
So-
you skip the other?
What age are we talking?
Oh, I think I was probably 6 or 7.
Okay.
I think.
Like your parents read it to
Yeah.
you?
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and so my dad read it to me initially, and
Mhm.
then I liked the story so much that I basically read it again.
Yeah.
And then throughout high school, I read through the Lord of the Rings.
Mhm.
I did read the Silmarillion once, but again, it's a history book. It's kind of hard to really like get into.
It's like going
story-wise.
in and finding, I always mess this up if it's Numbers or Deuteronomy in the Bible where it's just lineages.
Yeah.
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 So something I've heard people say, again, I've never read any of the books or the Silmarillion, is it like read the books and just have the Silmarillion nearby?
Yeah,
And you
so,
can
like,
like look
reference
up stuff
back.
that you're curious about as
Yeah.
you go instead of like trying to read it like a
Yeah.
book
It's,
cover to
it's
cover.
definitely not a novel. It is absolutely a work of historical fiction in that sense where it's just like, this is the history of your world.
Yeah. So, so kind of that being my start, I don't really consider like a lot of other, just because you're kind of like reading the grandfather of all fantasy
Right.
at this point.
it's why every fantasy has elves. They have dwarves. They
yeah,
have,
yeah, like because Tolkien kind of set the standard for this stuff, and
At least within Western.
yeah, correct,
fantasy,
yeah. And with that, you had this. I really like just kind of the general like it's a very idealized version of what like fantasy and I'll say medieval style
Yeah.
dragons and stuff would be, where you don't get into the nitty gritty of like how do these people go to the bathroom, or we don't need to know that. Like it's
Yeah.
just
They just don't.
yeah,
Yeah, you think elves poop?
yeah,
No.
but
Look
yeah,
at them. Come on.
it's just one of those kind of stories and fantasy realms that just kind of exist in this pristine
Mhm.
vision of what you want fantasy to be, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, so like, I read those while I was growing up and everything, but my uncle was also a very big fantasy fan.
Mhm.
He loved Lord of the Rings. He loved Dungeons and Dragons. He actually did some very cool artwork for Dungeons and Dragons, official.
Can confirm it's very
Back,
cool.
yeah,
Yes,
back
it is
in
very
the
cool.
early '80s, before it was like really big and hot in popular culture.
It was what Stranger Things was representing, not the revolution that Stranger
Yeah,
Things has caused kind of
yeah,
thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of his artwork they're all watercolors and they're all based off of Lord of the Rings scenes. So you have like the death of Smaug, the Black Rider,
Mhm.
kind of like trying to find the hobbits in the woods. And there's just some really like he has the really cool piece of like the Battle of Helm's Deep, which is fantastic. Of the Riders of Rohan coming out of Helm's Deep for the final,
Oh, the last charge.
the last charge.
Oh, wow.
And it's and those kind of idealized versions have just kind of like manifested in my head. So like whenever I think of fantasy, I'm like, well, this doesn't compare to Lord of the Rings, so I'm not really interested in it.
Fair. So just Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah, just Lord of the Rings. Pretty
Hard
much.
stuff.
But specifically, The Hobbit was your entry
The
point.
Hobbit was my entry point, but
Okay.
Lord of the Rings was when I really like got into the setting of it.
Yeah.
Because I really like the story of The Hobbit, but you don't get enough of like the world building, I think.
Sure. It's just a fun little
Yeah.
kid story
Mhm.
almost. Yeah. Steven, what about you?
All right. Well, this is a interesting choice for me because I was pretty sure Andrew was going to slam down The Hobbit,
Yeah.
the book, and I couldn't
Like
really.
Here it is.
Yeah,
Like a Beyblade or something? Hobbit, go! Pow!
I couldn't really pin down exactly what was my first
Like
real intro.
Yeah.
But one of my earliest memories of fantasy, like you look at something like, well, this is obviously a fantasy story as opposed to, say, like a Disney,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
but same vein, because it is animated, is the 1978 Lord of the Rings animated
Oh
movie.
man.
So I was going to ask if you had seen that.
Yeah,
Andrew.
I'd
So
seen.
I have not seen it probably since I was a kid, but
So
I
they
remember seeing
actually
it back in the day.
used to have it on Cartoon Network
Mm.
before
You
they
catch,
changed.
you catch pieces of
Yeah,
it.
you
Yeah.
could catch
Yeah.
pieces of it. That's when they still had Speed Racer on as
Oh,
like
yeah.
a main program.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it follows fairly well the stories of the book in Lord of the Rings, except it stops after the second book.
Yeah, because
There
they
was-
just ran out of budget.
They ran out of
Oh,
budget.
no.
They ran out. It just ends. And so as a kid,
Kids everywhere. What's happening?
yeah, as a kid, it was because it was very clear, what the goal was: get the ring to Mordor.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, they never get to Mordor. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah.
How is it? It just ends.
So the cool thing about that show is that was one of the first times that they used animation and live action footage
Mhm.
of basically like it's not rotoscoped. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like basically actors that they filmed and then they
Yeah.
superimposed it on the animation to essentially like have like the orcs and stuff like coming through the caverns and
Yeah.
whatnot. So they didn't have to like animate it fully.
Right.
So yeah, it's interesting.
It's
Um,
very dark.
It is very dark. I actually really enjoy the animation style,
Mhm.
and I hate that it was actually technically a commercial success when it was released.
Yeah.
Although it was kind of critically mediocre, and then of course audiences were all just kind of like, "Where's the other half?"
Right.
I don't understand. It's not a complete story. But for me, that was kind of the big launching off point. And when I think back to being a child, what some of the earliest fantasy I recall, it's seeing that and the anime. Like I can see Frodo, like just thinking about it. I can see
Yeah.
that animation and see the way like they made the characters move.
And they
and
had a very
everything.
unique style.
It did. It really did. I'm struggling to describe it, but if you look up images of
It's
this,
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's kind of on like a dark fantasy style where like everyone is, I'm not going to say like grotesque because that's a bad descriptor.
No, but it's similar to like that Ralph Bakshi. I can't remember
it's
how
the
you
same
pronounce it.
person.
It's the same guy,
Yeah,
right?
Same guy.
same
yeah.
guy.
Okay, never mind. That's why it's got
That's
that
why
style
it's
to
similar.
it.
Yeah. Well,
How do you say his last name?
Bakshi.
Bakshi.
Maybe.
Okay, the
Yeah, I
S
don't-
is always in a weird spot. I want to
Yeah.
say Basky or
Yeah.
okay,
I'm not
Bakshi.
positive that I'm right either. It has kind of
It's got
the
that
same,
style whether he did it or not.
Yeah, it has the same feel as like a Felix the Cat,
Or like what was that Fire and Ice? There was like another animated like,
maybe.
it's like a Conan the Barbarian but
Oh, okay, yeah.
cartoony.
Yeah.
And there was Ralph Bakshi did a lot of stuff.
But
Back
yeah,
in the
so far we're 2 for 2 on what was your first intro to fantasy? Whoa, it was Tolkien.
day.
Wow, go figure. The
Whoa,
grandfather of all
it's
fantasy
so
or Western
baffling
fantasy.
as to how that works. Ryan?
Okay, I'm an 80s baby. And the 80s were just lousy with
It
fantasy.
was Ralph
Just get out,
lousy with fantasy.
get
So-
out there and spray paint the side of your van with a unicorn.
Yes. I'm going to go with my number one. Then I want to read like a bunch of the other ones that I had on this list just
Yeah.
as like quick at the end. Okay. Number one, this was my entry, I think for sure. The earliest memories I have.
Mhm.
Masters of the Universe.
Oh, yeah.
He-Man.
Yeah,
He-Man.
Absolutely. I was a freak for He-Man as a child. And shortly thereafter became a fan of everything else. But like He-Man was it for me when I was young. And it was funny because at the same age, like I discovered He-Man, I also discovered Voltron. So I
Mhm,
had like
Mhm.
sci-fi and like I guess He-Man's kind of like fantasy sci-fi.
It's like a
'cause there's, like,
techno
flying stuff.
fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
With like man at arms and stuff.
Yeah.
as a kid, here's just a bunch of the movies that I used to love. First off, both Conan the Barbarian and the Destroyer. If you've never seen Conan
Classics.
the Destroyer, it's
I've never actually seen Conan the Barbarian.
What?
wow.
Oh,
Conan the
you
Barbarian's
need
really
to.
good. I like Conan the Destroyer better, even though it's probably a worse movie.
Yeah.
It is the worst movie.
It is absolutely a D&D campaign though, because you've got your wizard, you've got your barbarian, you've
Yeah.
got like the second one goes more into like the stereotypical,
Mhm.
stuff. Beastmaster, fantastic.
Beastmaster's great too.
The Neverending Story,
Yeah.
Legend,
Legend.
Labyrinth,
Yep.
Willow,
Yep.
The Dark Crystal.
Yep.
Like there was just so much stuff that I watched as a kid that was like I don't even think at the time I was conscious that it was like fantasy. Like I
Yeah.
didn't think about it that
Mhm.
way. With games, I was playing Legend of Zelda, like loved that like whole idea.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, man, it was just like you could turn around without like seeing something fantasy
It
related.
just ran you over. I
Yeah.
love how your whole list there where you're like Neverending Story, Legend, Dark Crystal, Labyrinth. It's like
Yeah.
how to scar an 80s child.
Oh,
and
this
4 movie
explains so much
titles.
about my life. But the problem I had with the list was I could not remember what my actual first exposure was
Yeah.
because all of that's just a miasma of like
So it's
it all happened in my childhood. So I don't know. I want to say Master of the Universe is probably my first exposure.
Yeah.
But all
Yeah,
of it
all-
happened within a very short time frame. So.
You can tell that there's a year difference between us because everything you listed is all also within my
Yeah.
pot of, well, what do I pull?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I just thinking more and more about it, I could just kept seeing the
The Lord of the
images
Rings.
of Frodo. So
yeah.
I had to go with this over
Yeah.
like Labyrinth
So
or
like,
something like that.
I didn't actually see the Lord of the Rings cartoon until like the 90s.
Mhm.
It was like later.
Yeah,
I saw
like
it
I-
on like Cartoon Network.
Yeah.
Or I don't think it was Cartoon Network at the time, but it was like it was some cable channel. It
Yeah.
was pre Cartoon Network, but I remember seeing it on
Mhm.
TV
Mhm.
on cable. But that was like later for me. I didn't see it young.
Yeah. So like all the films that you listed, I
Mhm.
actually didn't see until I was probably in my teens.
Yeah.
So like all of those
Oh.
are not really formative films.
You
for
avoided
me.
the scarring.
I guess. But then it's weird, because both my parents were really big into like science fiction. So like
Yeah.
all the science fiction films from like Close Encounters and E.T., which was terrifying,
Yep.
and just a
Right.
bunch of other stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
that is where that's why I think I really gravitate more towards science fiction
Mhm.
Yeah.
than I do fantasy, because the only fantasy stuff that I ever really got a hold of was just Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit.
Right.
And I attribute all this to my mom. She exposed me to both E.T.,
Yeah.
Close
Mhm.
Encounters, Star Trek, Star Wars, and all of this fantasy stuff hand in hand. My
Yeah.
dad was just kind of there like, what are we watching?
Yeah, my dad was really because him and his brother, my
Mhm.
uncle, they were both really big into fantasy because that was big whenever they were growing up
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
everything. And it's really interesting to kind of see how everyone's opinions get formed because some people really love like the really hard medieval style of like I'll say Game of Thrones
Mhm.
or because I never even got into any of the Hercules like TV shows or anything
Oh,
like
yeah.
that, like
Yeah,
from
I've
the
seen
90s.
ya,
Yeah. where like those are just never really those just never really clicked with me because I was just like, well, this isn't Lord of the Rings. This is just people with swords slapping each other with them.
I enjoyed those shows when they came out, but they weren't like my favorite.
Yeah.
Highlander, that's probably another kind of fantasy.
Does that count as fantasy?
I don't know. Probably not. That's at the outer edges of it if it is.
There can only be one.
They have swords.
There can be only one. Yeah. It's a thing. It's its own little world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put it off to the side.
And never talk about it again.
But when I was looking at my list, I was like, Master of the Universe, Conan the Barbarian, Beastmaster. It's 3 shirtless dudes.
So this is tangents. Did you watch the new Masters of the Universe when it came out?
No, it's again on my ever-growing list of
Forever
things I need to
list,
see.
yeah.
I
heard
what happens when you join a podcast.
Well, so the thing I heard about it that kind of kept me away from watching it immediately was that like it is made for people who watched He-Man, back in the day, and that it picks up like right where it left off and continues all the
so you need
storylines.
to like understand.
And I was like, I haven't seen Masters of the Universe in almost 40 years.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna have to do a rewatch, or at least watch like a primer before I just jump back in.
Yeah. We watched the first half of it because it came out like in 2 halves. I guess they were like, we want to be anime. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it was fine.
It's fine.
Supposedly the second half is much better, but we haven't gotten to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So. But
I'll probably check it out at one point. But
I did like how you referenced in Conan the Destroyer, you have kind of your prototypical D&D party, your wizard, your barbarian.
You do.
Because it's all based off of the Lord of the Rings, like your fellowship, right? That is your prototypical D&D party.
Yeah, which is just funny how that works out.
It is
we're
funny.
talking about Lord of the Rings.
Almost like it's the progenitor of all of this. Like its birthplace here.
Yep.
So this, however, for our episode is not talking about the absolute birth of fantasy. It's talking about the birth of fantasy's prequel.
Yeah.
In Rings of Power, where we are exploring the second age of Middle Earth. I hesitate. I don't want to call it Lord of the Rings.
Well, if you don't know at home, the third age is when the Lord of the Rings happens. Right. This is the second age. And the first age, we don't know what happens.
Yes, we haven't really had. There are several
the world
books
is made,
that cover it.
Things happen.
That's actually before the first age.
Never mind. Zero age.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's YT. It's Year of the Trees.
Year of the Trees.
Not kidding. Not making this up. But yes, for people who've seen Lord of the Rings, the scene at the start of the movie where they recount the Sauron being defeated and the ring being found.
This is basically the story for
that moment is the end of second age, beginning of third age. Lord of the Rings is all third age.
So when that happened, did everybody just turn around and go, "Is this the third age? Are we starting it right now?"
They're like, it's the age of Aquarius.
Everybody
dancing.
Synchronized their watches.
Yeah.
Third age starts in 3, 2, 1.
It's a really big celebration party.
Yeah, you go to Rohan. Y'all are still in the second age.
It's been the third age
This is
for
like Age
months.
of Empires, where like you're in the third age of like the Iron Age, and you go over to your neighbor and you're like, you're still in the Stone Age.
How agrarian.
But yeah, so let's do a synopsis, and this synopsis covers what we just covered, kind of. But so it goes. Hurting Ryan over here. Why are you snorting?
I don't know.
I think I got him with the Age of Empires.
That started the ball rolling.
This epic drama is set thousands of years before the events of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and will take viewers back to an era in which great powers were forged, kingdoms rose to glory and fell to ruin, unlikely heroes were tested, hope hung by the finest of threads, and the greatest villain that ever flowed from Tolkien's pen threatened to cover all the world in darkness.
I mean, he was basically
that was well written.
That was from Amazon Studios. So.
Oh wow!
I mean,
way to go, Jeff Bezos.
I know, right? Stayed up late for that
wrote
one.
that personally.
He's like, it's perfect.
I mean, Sauron's kind of basically the only real villain that he's ever. I mean, like, kind of. I mean, I don't really count the Silmarillion because it's just a history book.
Well, again, we can I don't really want to just dive into all this because there are other books, right? You have stuff that was assembled by Tolkien's son, Christopher, into stuff like Fall of Gondolin, Children of Hurin, Beren and Luthien. These all take place in the First Age. Mm-hmm. And for that, your big baddie is Morgoth. Or Melkor
hmm
who
Got like
beco-
5 names, right?
everybody has like legit 15 names minimum. If you don't have at least 6 names, you are a nobody.
That's not confusing at all.
No, it's incredibly confusing. But he's the big baddie, and then Sauron was one of his servants.
Yeah, yeah. Which
So-
I mean, they go into in great detail in the first episode.
Yeah,
Basically,
they do a pretty good job of giving you an idea of what has happened, what hasn't happened, etc.
yeah.
Which you need because there's a lot here. But let's we got a summary. Let's get some info.
Yeah.
So our showrunners for this are Patrick McKay and John Payne,
hmm
and they both come from Bad Robot Studios,
Okay,
So
so
that's-
J.J. Abrams.
J.J. Abrams. And when realizing that some story elements suddenly made way more sense.
There
They
are no lens flares, at least that I remember.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
so well. It's not the future. It's fantasy.
Yeah.
you can still have a lens flare in fantasy.
Off of the torch or something.
So have they been showrunners for anything before, or is this their first?
This is the first time they were showrunners. They're both credited for. They both have writing credits for Star Trek Into Darkness.
It's not.
Oh,
That's
okay.
not the best.
That's the best
It's
Star
one to
Trek.
have writing credits
best.
for.
It's not the best endorsement, but it's the biggest thing I could
That's,
find.
that's a pretty big leap for Amazon putting in, almost $1 billion for a total
An
budget.
Two basically
incredible
unknown
amount of money.
showrunners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So our music is by Bear McCreary.
Yep. And helpfully produced with
Well,
Howard
Yeah,
Shore.
the main theme is from Howard Shore.
It is.
Yeah.
And Bear is pretty well known.
Battlestar Galactica, baby.
And The Walking Dead are the two big ones.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But he has a huge, something like
Oh, yeah.
almost 200 credits.
Yeah.
Done all kinds of stuff in video games, TV, movies, just all over the board.
He's got a really cool name.
He does have
He
a cool
also
name.
has an awesome name. Uh,
My name's Bear. Bear McCreary.
Bear McCreary. I would
What
love
if
to
he's
be able
like
to
not
introduce-
gruff at all? It's Bear. Bear McCreary. What?
How?
How'd
Why?
you get that name?
So usually we talk a little bit about the cost, the budget, and the box office, right? You can't
Yeah.
really do that with a streamed TV show.
Yeah.
But for budget, first season, $465 million production budget.
Yeah, and it
I-
shows.
Now that's just the production budget. That ignores the $250 million for rights.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
ignores whatever effort in
Marketing.
advertising and
Yeah.
marketing there's been here.
Yep.
If you just take that $465 million, so it's $58 million per episode.
Yeah.
Nah, it gets worse. If you divide it out, it requires 3.3 million yearly Amazon Prime subscriptions to pay for the first season.
Wow.
They probably have that.
They-
easy.
no, there's
They
no
got
way
that
they
in the
don't.
bag.
They do, but the thing is when you pay for Prime, you're getting other stuff like
Sure.
shipping.
Yeah. It's
and-
just wow.
and that's
just,
probably in
other
comparison
shows.
to Wheel of Time that had, I think, a budget of like $18 in a Subway coupon.
yeah. I mean,
Is that-
it's a pretty big disparity.
I-
I
will
will check
say,
my figures. But
for
close, I
whatever
think.
else we
I
go
think it's
into
pretty
here,
Sorry, it was an Arby's coupon. My bad. I just looked it up.
Oh, it's a little bit better.
Yeah.
yeah, for whatever else we go into here, they certainly learned some lessons. Now, if you go way back and listen to our episode on Wheel of Time, I believe Andrew was the one who posited he hoped that they would learn lessons and apply them here.
And I think they did.
I think they did.
I think
yeah.
they absolutely
They
did.
learned a lot of lessons.
They learned a lot of lessons, and I still think that the only reason why they did the Wheel of Time series is basically as a soft opening for Rings of
A
Power.
It's like
fantasy
stretching
test.
out before a workout.
Yeah.
Which that just makes me angrier, but it's okay. It's okay. We're gonna live. It's
Hey,
all right.
there's one fantasy here.
So overall, we took all of our scores across spectacle, the performance, the plot, the entertainment, the score of the score. We threw all that into a forge with some other better
Some mithril.
elements, some mithril, and we arrived to a score of 7.5.
I think that's respectable.
That's a respectable score.
Yeah.
I like that score. That feels right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it does.
This is not. I don't think any of us are sitting here going like, "This was the best segment of TV I've ever watched," and
No.
none of us came in here going, Book of Boba Fett wasn't that bad.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. No, like this is there are some minor problems narrative wise for
Yeah.
me, but I think that the production values, the score or the soundtrack from Bear McCreary is fantastic.
Mhm.
There are some really good performances, maybe some also lackluster performances throughout the show.
It's that It's a mixed bag.
It is a mixed
I mean,
bag.
we've hit all the minutia here of describing what it is. Who wants to give some thoughts?
Andrew was
Andrew
already
was
doing
going,
that.
so
yeah,
pick it up. Yeah.
Go ahead.
But so, I mean, like the production value visually and set design, and they do a lot of practical effects here.
Mhm.
There is, I mean, like clearly the money that they poured into these episodes absolutely shows.
Yeah.
They
went somewhere.
Whenever the CGI does happen, it actually is quite good. I'll say like 9 times out of 10. Like there's a couple.
There are a
things
few
here-
jarring moments.
but for the most part, it's honestly just fantastic. Like visually, it is a stunning thing.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I liked it. I think the for me the writing and pacing feels a little uneven at times.
I think maybe there was like one story too many.
Well,
Mhm.
even like to me, like it feels like there are certain scenes and certain like interactions between characters that are like really well written, and there's like these really cool lines of dialogue,
Yeah.
and then they will turn around and the very next scene has like I looked at my wife at one point and said, "Was this written by an AI?" Because I was predicting what they were going to say because it's just the most bottom
Yeah,
of
by-
the bin,
by
like,
the-
Absolutely
just-
predictable.
yeah, predictable, and like and so it was this weird like for me at least unevenness of like this one scene that was like really good and really well written, and then this next whole section was like just boilerplate. And
So,
I don't know if that's
I
inexperienced
think-
showrunners or
Well, so I think that it's really the content of what they were talking about because I had a lot of problems with one specific storyline that I will get into, obviously.
Post spoiler.
Post-spoiler
yeah.
wall.
yeah. Overall, what did you think, Steven?
I mean, for the most part, it was decent. Again, measured up against Wheel of Time, it comes out quite well.
Yeah.
I sure would hope so.
And something that I've seen from a lot of other reviews, a lot of people are complimenting how well it looks,
I mean, it's gorgeous.
how well
yeah.
it feels. Right, like when you see these places, like when we see
It felt like Lord of the Rings.
Numenor, you can see architecture there that was obviously pulled from Peter Jackson and Tolkien's idea of what Gondor looks like, right?
Yeah.
And it makes sense. These are the same people at the end of the day.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like stuff like that, I think is very cohesive, and that's appreciated. So on one hand, I didn't like the idea of all these storylines spread over everywhere.
Mhm.
On the other hand, because certain storylines were more entertaining than others, I appreciated it, right?
Yeah, because it gives you a little bit of a respite of like, oh, this episode is going to be about these guys. Cool, I like these guys.
Yeah, when it's like, oh, please just take me back to them. I don't need
Or
any
yeah,
more
I
of
mean,
this.
sometimes just the bouncing back and forth
Yeah,
can
it
help
helps.
break it up, so you're
Yeah.
not just one note. You
Yeah.
know,
it does create some other narrative issues
Mhm.
for a viewer. Like the passage of time in this is real questionable.
It is fast and loose.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
yeah. This is like Lord of the Rings. Middle Earth feels huge. This Middle Earth feels like your block.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Sometimes I
a
don't know.
little bit. I don't know about that. Like, I don't know. There's a couple things, but
mean,
we can't get into
we'll get into that
details.
deeper.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, the passage of time didn't really. Nothing stood out to me as being egregious. It was just I just understood that they were
Yeah.
know, doing that for plot reasons to be able to move
Right.
back and forth between stuff and keep things going.
Yeah,
Because
it didn't bother me either.
well, for me, if anything, like there were some times where the pacing was too slow. So I wish
Yes.
they would have sped some things up.
Yeah.
To me, like so.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
For
it's-
me, the passage of time was not like
It wasn't a,
a
big sticking
detractor.
point.
Yeah.
It's important to note that when they're trying to cover the Second Age, it's a 3,600 year time period, something like that.
It's a lot of time.
And a lot of the events they're pulling from happen all the way across that. So we can't sit around and wait 400 years for them to figure out how to forge a
Right.
ring. Like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
But it is. I won't say that it's whiplash per se. When The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, the other stories that we've seen on screen from this universe are all kind of about the journey, and none of these stories are really about a journey.
They're about the events.
They're
that
about the events,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, you're trying to hit the big events that happen
Mhm.
in Middle Earth to create basically Lord of the Rings, the story.
Right.
yeah.
And yeah, kind of like what you said, it's about the journey for Lord of the Rings because it's a hero's journey at that
Mhm.
point. Where this is not really about a hero's journey. This is about the failings of essentially a whole people.
Lots of people.
Lots
Lots
of
of
people.
different
Lots of
people.
people.
Yeah. There's a lot of failings.
Yeah.
Here coming up or in the offing, etc. I am interested too because this is season 1, and if I
Mhm.
recall correctly, they had 5 seasons.
I
There
think
are
they're
5
yeah.
slated seasons.
So they're trying to take these rights, right, and break it out 50 million per season,
Yeah.
theoretically. I am interested to see because we got pretty far in one season,
Yeah.
Yeah.
honestly.
Well, I think this is like it's kind of silly because this is the prequel to the prequel, right?
Right.
And it kind of feels like this season was just to set up the main characters going forward and the main factions. So then season 2 is really where it's going to hit its stride, I think.
Right. Yeah, we definitely created kind of some sub factions that were almost, but by the time the season ends, irrelevant to the actual players we should be interested in a sense. Which was kind of interesting. They just almost needed filler to get there. I don't know.
Yeah, there's some interesting story choices. I don't know if I dislike the story choices, though.
I'm not saying they were bad.
Yeah.
It's more of a question of pacing and did you need this to be 5 instead of 4 or even 3 and it'd just be 10 episode season or something like that, you know?
Well, so I've heard that part of the rights thing was that the Tolkien estate was like, you cannot have more than 8 episodes.
Oh, interesting.
That was like in the actual
weird.
agreement. Yeah.
So I do know that for the Tolkien estate, they said that they cannot change anything about how Lord of the Rings ends up.
Yeah.
Essentially. So you can't change basically like the main character. Like you can't like kill Galadriel.
Right. Yeah. You can't guide. Yeah. But like,
which is going to be a problem for them narratively.
Yeah.
And has already started to be a problem. We can't get into that because the spoilers.
With the 8 episode limit, though, I think that's why each episode was like a little over an hour long.
Yeah.
Instead of it being 10, 45-minute episodes, it's like 8 hour and 5 minute, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. Because sometimes that extra 20 minutes kind of helps, push where you need the story to go.
Yeah.
Narratively speaking.
Yeah.
Well, or it lets you break up episodes in such a way that they have a more natural conclusion.
Yeah.
If you can have, 9 breaks with 10 episodes instead of 7 breaks with 8 episodes or whatever, you can do a little better job of spreading your story out. And then maybe it doesn't feel like this episode dragged, whereas this episode didn't because who we were focused on, who we weren't focused on.
Yeah.
I did think it was interesting. I was trying to get to it real quick. On that budget, right? The budget was, a huge, staggering number.
Yeah.
And I was looking for a comparison here. I'm just going to throw this out.
While you're doing that, Peter Jackson was talked about to help run this series, and apparently he presented a general idea of where he wanted it to go, and they said no.
Interesting.
So,
okay then.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was how well he had the confines of what the rights would be. Like the limits of storytelling.
It's possible that he just he's very obviously a Tolkien scholar at this point, I'm sure.
Yeah, at this point,
and he probably was like, well, this is how it would go. And they're like, well, we actually can't do that because we don't have the rights to that.
Yeah.
It probably was.
Yeah.
Or it'd be like, well, that's kind of boring. What if we had a more compelling story from the first age? Like, we can't do the first age.
Yeah.
So a close comparison for budgets, right? Because I know Andrew's a huge fan. Season 4 of Stranger Things.
Yeah.
And those are long episodes.
Those are very long episodes.
The reported budget per episode is $30 million.
Okay, so it's actually a little
half.
Yes, it's half of what each episode of Rings of Power was, which is still pretty stunning just because Stranger Things looked fantastic.
Yeah, it's almost, there is some level of the numbers we're throwing around here where I'm almost a little staggered and I'm somewhat curious as to where some of this money went.
Where some of the money went.
And that's not a shot of, oh, it looks bad. It's like at some point you spend so much and like there's diminishing returns, right? Because like this looks good, the Elven havens or whatever, they look good. Like these places look good. It's just not sure where the budget also went.
I mean, I would say it's because literally every outfit has to be fabricated. In Stranger Things, you can just find some 80s clothes.
Oh, sure. Let's stonewash some jeans and call it a day.
Well, even on top of that, I know I mentioned it earlier, but practical effects were very important for this show.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of practical effects in this show that really held up, I felt.
There's a lot of horses that
A
cost
lot of
money.
horses.
Now that kind of thing does
Stranger
cost a lot
Things
of
had
money.
no horses.
Yeah, horses are very expensive.
That's true. Once you start putting a lot of people in armor,
and I
your
think a
cost
lot
goes
of
up.
these sets had to be built probably. So like again with Stranger Things, you can just find like
I mean, they flew down to New Zealand, they bulldozed the Shire, and said, "All right, start again.
Get it out of here." All right, right now I'm looking in my wallet and I see $3. Do you know what that is?
That's 3 months.
That's 3 months access to our Patreon bonus content. every episode we've ever posted.
That's cheaper than Starbucks coffee.
Way cheaper.
I was actually going to refer it to gallon of gas, but then I got depressed.
don't say that.
Yeah.
It's too real.
Yeah. For less than 1/3 or maybe 1/4 of a gallon of gas, you can get access to all of our Patreon bonus episodes.
That is fun episodes like a very heated fast food tier list.
Yeah, these are some very different subject matters.
Yeah.
They're different formats. These aren't like our normal.
Yeah, we have
episodes.
scary movie recommendations.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
It's October.
It is October.
Yeah.
Are you looking for something spooky to watch? We got you covered. $1. $1. You get access to all of our bonus content. Go to patreon.com, search Spoilers Intended, or go to spoilersintendedpodcast.com.
Yep, you can find the link there. Alrighty, everybody. In case you didn't get the message, that was your spoiler wall. From here on out, it is all spoilers all the time. If you haven't finished episode 8, get out of here and come back in an hour.
You can come back. I mean, you could stay, but you're just
Get out
gonna
of
get, you're just gonna
here.
get spoiled too. Honestly,
Come back in an hour.
a pretty good, a pretty solid finale. I felt for just the final reveal.
I do think
Yeah.
that the episodes kind of in the middle, there was maybe a little slump,
Yeah,
and then we picked it back up into the last 2 episodes.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely. Last two.
yeah. Well, I mean, but you like.
Well, I would say that it's less that there's a slump in the middle and more that there are certain storylines that slow down and other
yeah.
ones speed up.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say the overall episodes were slow. It's just certain.
The
Parts of the
pacing
story
kind of is
slow
very
down.
much like an ebb and flow with this show.
Yeah.
Where like, you know, they're in Numenor with Galadriel for
It's
like
Numenor.
three
Numenor.
episodes. I
They
can't
talk-
do the tongue roll.
I love how
Numenor.
they just talk like
Numenor.
they talk like normal people, and it's like, yeah, blah 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 blah. Galadriel.
Oh, they put the stank
we
on
not?
Galadriel's name. Let me tell you, around our household, I've been like, Galadriel.
Galadriel.
You got to put the stank on it when you say it. Yes.
Yeah, they're just talking like normal people. And it's like Isildur.
Yeah.
yeah.
Really?
Listen to me. Isildur.
Oh,
Dang.
we got angry about this all. Of a
I was
sudden.
really hoping there was going to be a line that it's like, Galadriel is here in Numenor with me and Isildur, and we're going to Mordor to find Sauron. And it's going to be like,
just
his
everything
tongue would just fall.
rolls.
And look at the Harfoot, you know, just like rolling everything.
You know, I will say I'm actually surprised that they did not even hint that Isildur is still alive.
Do they have to hint
So-
at that though?
I'll
Honestly.
get back to that when we get to plot.
Plot,
sure,
But
yeah,
like,
yeah.
there was a lot of stuff they did in this show that I thought was an interesting choice based on the fact of like
We
it's
already know.
well, it's almost like there is a section of the writer's room that was like, we should write this for people that have never seen The Lord of the Rings. And I'm like, who are these people that
Yeah.
are starting
That are
with the
watching
Rings
this.
of Power?
Yeah.
But I guess they're out there.
They're-
Like,
yeah,
I guess
it
that's-
probably is. I
Surely
mean,
exists somewhere.
And those people are on the edge of their seat during a lot of scenes where I'm like, well, I know all these people live. So.
it's all the Gen Zers.
Gen Z.
All the Zoomers.
They're just
man.
vaping it on TikTok and they look over and they're like, what's this Rings of Power?
Well, before we get into the plot, let's start at the top. Kicking off a spectacle. I'm gonna let Andrew go first.
Oh, okay. All right. So I have a score, and
You
then
do?
I have a general state. Not even a statement. I have a general
Statement.
A tent.
I
This
have
is like a-
I have a thought, and then I have a soapbox.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So
you
I
have
ha-
3 things.
I have 3 things.
I don't know if
Should we have started with Andrew?
I don't know.
Okay, so you have. I gave it a 9
Okay.
because I this is a fantastically beautiful series. The
Yeah.
set design is great. The
Mhm.
practical effects are awesome. The costume design is phenomenal.
Yeah.
The armor
Mhm.
that what's his face?
Good character.
The elf.
Arondir?
Arondir. Yeah,
Arondir.
I can't remember the
I don't know
name.
if he rolls
I don't know if he rolls it either.
I'm already,
Arondir.
I'm already bad with the names, and then you start adding elven names in there. It's completely.
Oh, it's
blank.
like,
come on, guys.
But yeah, his armor's great.
Oh, his armor's so cool.
I
Like
like it.
the face in the wood.
Yeah.
It feels like something, and I hate making this comparison because they have come out and said so many times, this is not our Game of Thrones. But honestly, if you had someone from the North in Game of Thrones with that kind of armor,
Mhm.
I would be like, yeah, it fits perfectly this universe. It
Well,
still
it's-
fits perfectly this universe.
Yeah, it does.
It's cool seeing him standing next to Galadriel towards the end too, when you can see the difference in their arm. They're both
Oh,
elaborate
yeah.
and cool, but in totally different styles.
Well, and you
of, like-
also see Arda's armor, which
Mhm.
is also its own separate style.
Yeah.
Because I assume, right, the Numenorians didn't just go around and be like, we got some old dusty elf armor kicking around somewhere to give Galadriel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Presumably this was their style, and it kind of fits the helmets you see them wear,
Mhm.
etc.
And then you have like just the general aesthetic of the show, which is again, this is not medieval Game of Thrones fantasy. This is
high fantasy.
High fantasy.
People are clean, dang it.
Yeah, it's clean.
Yeah.
Like everything is crisp and sharp. The scene whenever Galadriel and Halbrand are riding, or not Halbrand, Elendil.
Elendil.
Are riding on the beach to the archive tower or whatever. Oh man,
I have other issues with that scene.
That's fine. Yeah, like that's probably plot. Go away.
It's not plot. No, it's not plot. It's just
It's the cheesy smile.
Sometimes when you do slow motion, you need to not have the horse's face in the slow motion because the horse looks derpy as all get out.
Listen, most horses do a lot of the time.
Horses just look like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so my big soapbox here is the fact that the preview teaser for Rings of Power has a beautifully practical effect shot with a Phantom FX slow-mo camera. And you chose not to use it, and you give us whatever opening this was?
Yeah, the opening struggled. Like, there was a couple times where I was like, maybe I'm just like, I don't get it. And so I looked
Are they
up,
making designs that I don't see?
So the creation of the universe in Tolkien's universe was done by, it's like something like a song.
It's a song.
Yes.
And like, what they're doing is when you play sound underneath a plate,
right.
It skips. So
I'm like, okay, I see what you were going for.
I understand the concept.
But seriously,
it's just kind of there.
The teaser trailer was just your intro. You've already made it. You've paid the money. You put in the time and the effort. Make use of it.
I know.
I hadn't even seen that teaser until you posted it in the group chat. Because I started skipping the intro after a few episodes because
it'd be like,
I rarely do. I like intros.
And this is honestly, I think this is a big knock too, because this is kind of edging into score a little bit, but this was not. I didn't really like this song at all.
No, of all the banger songs on this soundtrack, that's the one. Like to me, that's one of the least interesting songs in the thing. So it's got a weird intro, the least interesting song, and it also, like, I kept thinking, okay, maybe they're going to do like Game of Thrones and like slowly change and evolve the intro to reflect like changes in the world as they go. So it'll make different patterns or show different shapes.
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah. It was very disappointing for how good the teaser was because it's all practical.
Now, was this all practical too?
No.
Oh.
No, I don't believe so.
There's no way you can make that kind of shape, like reliably that kind of shape.
I mean, you can. I've seen people take like sound,
but maybe not like that intricate with
tones.
That's
what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
I don't know if
that
it's like that intricate.
Yeah. Okay, so then here's the reason why I didn't give it a 10 because honestly, it's very close. Is because some of the fight choreography was not very interesting or exciting.
Okay,
particularly the scene where Galadriel is fighting all of the Numenorian soldiers, like training.
Oh, the trainers.
It's not a good fight scene.
It's not a very well choreographed fight scene. You could definitely tell that. I think that the cinematographers didn't really know how to shoot it, and then also no one really knew how to choreograph it.
Yeah.
And it really took a lot of the energy out of kind of what I was expecting from it, just because you have this historied, very seasoned fighter being able to best
and a very agile fighter.
Oh yes,
right.
Yeah. So with that kind of stuff, it did that kind of knocked it down a couple points. Like even the fight in the town in the Southlands with all the Numenorians and everything, like it just didn't really do it for me.
Okay.
But. Again, that is like a very minor nitpick. It was still exciting. It just could have been better.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's common with a lot of shows, though, with like fight choreography. There's just some shows that like do okay with it.
They put the time in. Other places just don't.
The actors, they don't know how to fight. Thank you, Jackie.
We've all seen Jackie Chan, so we're all ruined for like most fight scenes and most everything. So like it's hard to like, I'll jump in. Yeah, I gave it a 10. 10 across the board.
Again, it was a very close 10 for me.
For me, like, I agree that the sword fights could have been better. It didn't matter. This show made me excited to own a 4K TV.
Right?
With HDR. This thing looks beautiful. Incredible. And the sound, well, like the Dolby Atmos, the Dolby Vision, all of it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But I don't have a whole lot to add to what you just said. That I will shout out the lighting. I think the lighting in a lot of scenes was crazy good, and that
especially with the Harfoots.
Yeah.
There was so much clarity of what they like. I mean,
Well,
it
you had
was
really good
beautiful.
kind of the warm tones that you expect from Lord of the Rings when you go to the Shire.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Same kind of tones placed on the heart, which fits because you know who they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And that played through really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the last thing I would say is that for me, while the fight choreography, I agree, wasn't like, blowing my mind or anything.
Yeah.
The gigantic moments that do happen,
Mhm.
like Mount Doom,
Oh,
and like
yeah.
the Great Wave,
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff for me was incredibly executed and looked fantastic. Like I went back and watched 2 or 3 of those scenes just to be like, holy moly! Like I've never
Yeah.
seen a TV show look this good on some levels.
Yeah,
you know?
especially whenever at the final episode, whenever I'm just assuming it's Gandalf at this point.
Yeah, I think
when
it is.
Gandalf or the
It
stranger.
100% is.
Well, I mean, because they basically hit you over the head with the lines that he uses from Lord of the Rings.
Well, and
He's-
also, I mean, he has a fondness for hobbits.
Yeah, he does.
Mhm.
Guess where
but
it came from.
Whenever all of the leaves and stuff are kind of like surrounding him.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And oh man, it just looks so
Yeah.
pretty.
There's a
Yes.
lot of moments where I was impressed with the visuals, not
Mhm.
only just on like quote for TV, like in general.
Yeah.
And that for me gave it a 10.
Yeah.
Steven?
I'm going to be harsh.
Yeah.
I gave it an 8.
4.
No. So the part of it is the intro.
Yeah. The intro was
You had something. Just hit me with some, that like high pitched quavering India stuff and do the pour from the trailer.
Yeah.
Not that. But just like you
I don't even know
had
if that's
it.
in you.
I have no idea. But like you had it right there and you just didn't.
Yeah.
And that's a knock mostly because like I skipped almost every intro.
I know.
And I actually we'll get into it when we get to score, but I actually kind of liked the main theme.
Mm,
But you know what? I didn't get to listen to it very
I
often.
didn't
You know
dislike
why?
it. I just didn't
Because
love it.
Amazon was like, here's an ad, skip. Here's a recap, skip. Here's an intro, skip. And then it was like, okay, now we
when
get
you
there.
have other bangers in the soundtrack like Numenor.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Our song is so
I mean,
cool.
it's so
no,
good.
That's,
The Casa
that's totally
Doom song?
fine.
That one
Totally fine.
rips.
Costuming, right? They learned the lesson from Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
When,
yeah.
when
you have to actually like wear the clothes.
yeah, like when you want people to be like poor farmers, they actually wear their clothes. When you want people,
they don't look like some Manhattan.
Looks like
Times
something you got at
Square
Spirit
fashion
Halloween.
choice.
H&M model. Or like when you want people to look like the wealthy nobility who don't do their own work, you did it. Like they found that balance between these two.
Yeah.
Andrew's dying over here.
I'm just imagining Rand in his like shepherd's cloak walking
His
down.
$800 jacket.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would kill me. And I have to say again, like they learned that lesson really well, and I'm really thankful for it.
Well, and what I'm curious about is like, did they learn or were they in production simultaneously? It's just the showrunners on this show were like, we can't get that jacket out of here, put it in the trash. And then the people will tell them, ooh, what's this jacket in the trash?
This is the trash.
Hey guys,
So-
I can save us some
Hey,
money.
they just threw this out of the prop room, man. Grab it quick. They had like 3 people who were assigned to just stand outside the door of the Lord of the Rings room and just grab whatever came
dumpster
out.
dive every day.
I mean, there's definitely no way that they weren't under production at the same time. So
Right.
like I
To some
know
extent,
that my general idea of them like having a soft open for
Yeah,
Lord of the Rings.
yeah, yeah.
I know that doesn't actually hold up in any kind of real world, but in my mind, it still is real.
That's still how it's
real to me.
Yeah.
Now there are definitely some CGI things.
The wargs are pretty bad.
So the early episode, the Chihuahua warg is what I've been calling it. It has
Chihuahua.
the worst
Which one?
face. It's the one that confronts the elves when they're they're digging
They're digging in front of the
Oh,
tree,
and they
yeah.
try to escape.
It's
and
pretty rough.
It's
I'll have to
that-
go back and watch
it's
it.
not even that the CGI is bad. It's just this creature doesn't fit this universe. This creature looks like it's gonna like leap out of the shadows, and it's one of the hyenas from yeah, or it's like a hyena from The Lion King or something. Like,
Yeah.
it's like Ed.
So
You
do you
know?
think they were just trying to differentiate it from like the ones in the
The
Lord of the
other
Rings?
wargs? I don't-
Movies?
Well,
I don't
they
know.
look different. Like the wargs, I assume
From,
they're
like,
not
from Two
wolves,
Towers.
but that we see later in Rings of Power look
Yeah.
vastly different from this one.
Well, I mean, it could be completely different. You know, like not every wolf looks the
Species.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's the face. Like the ones
yes, they
from,
do.
The ones from
We all
Two
have one look.
Towers are also a much different face, right? They're
Yeah.
much more of a
Mhm.
snub nose,
Mhm.
beady eye.
They're pugs. They've been
They
inbred for
they kind of
thousands
are, yeah.
of years.
They kind of are.
They have
whereas,
very trouble breathing.
whereas these wargs kind of look like
CPAP machine.
crocodiles. Doggy CPAP.
We need a magical warg CPAP we gotta put on this thing.
But like the costuming is great.
Yeah.
The sets, a lot of the places they go to look good. They learned a lesson. Someone learned a lesson. They went back and they watched the prequels for Star Wars,
Uh-huh.
and they said, a top-down shot walking into the doorway that has light coming out with a cloak behind you. We're gonna do that.
It looks good.
It looks good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they learned that lesson. They made use of it here.
There's some pretty cool shots, especially after essentially the cataclysm, and the initial opening scene with Galadriel, like kind of like stumbling through with like ash on her face.
That
and
red
everything.
mist, yeah.
Oh man,
That was
I,
really
I
good.
won't lie. For that one, I was just kind of looking like, why is everyone not just Pompeii right now?
I
I
mean,
mean, they weren't that close.
I mean,
Close enough.
they're close. I mean, there was
It's a
definitely
fantasy show. They were
I
not
know,
close
I
enough to
know.
die.
it was a
It's funny.
pyroclastic event.
Yeah.
However, this is still Middle Earth and not Earth.
Yeah.
So,
Middle Earth is Earth.
mm,
It is. So they actually show.
Hashtag not my earth.
They actually show Galadriel when she is in the ocean at night.
Galadriel.
Whatever.
Galadriel.
I've given up. I don't care.
Real.
She looks up into the sky and you can see the Big Dipper.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, in the
Well,
stars.
Oh, wow. Look at
Only
that.
true Tolkien fans know.
I actually questioned. It made me question. Like, wait a minute. Was Middle Earth supposed to be like a prehistory Earth? And I looked.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, it is. Okay, cool.
Yeah, well, yeah, whatever.
Either way,
we'll get into some other
very
fun
cool
facts about that
visuals in
later.
that
But
episode.
yeah. No, good visuals all around for the most part. A couple questionable moments, a couple questionable CGIs. The intro was
I challenge you to find any show though that looks
no.
this good.
Yeah, no, there isn't.
That's why I
basically no
gave it a 10.
show.
If not in this, what? What gets a 10
We
if
want,
this
we
doesn't get a
want you to
10?
go further, push it further.
More money.
More money.
It's like Jeff Bezos is just throwing money into a furnace, like on a steam train. More money.
Yeah, I mean, for a live action show, this is definitely the prettiest I've ever seen any kind of fantasy setting. Period.
Mhm.
Like just it's breathtaking. It's really
Well, and so
good.
I've started watching House of the Dragon also
I'm sorry.
at the same time, and I think it's which is crazy to me on some level that like a lot of people are like acting like these shows are competing.
They
Or
are
to me,
not.
they are like
They're
night
very
and day.
different.
No,
if
they're
anything,
night and day.
if you're watching both these simultaneously, this is like a respite from the dark.
Yeah,
like
it
it's
is.
almost like a perfect back and forth if
Yeah.
you're into this kind of stuff.
It's a good dichotomy, actually.
But like with that show, like the costuming is great. Like there are so many little details on stuff on
Mhm.
both. But then there are moments with the CG in House of the Dragon where it's mostly the key. I'll see it every
Yeah.
now and then that you can tell one
they were
part was
not
on a
there.
green screen. Where on this show, I rarely had moments where I was like, oh, that's obviously a green screen.
Definitely agree.
There were several times where I was going, how
yeah,
did they
how
get
did
this
you
key
composite
so
this?
clean? You
Yeah.
know?
$400 million. That's how.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, $465
Yeah,
million dollars.
Okay, so let's move on to the performance.
Performance.
I
the
went
performance?
first last time, so
I'll go first.
Go
Yeah.
for it.
I gave it a 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
For me, overall, it's pretty good. I think some of the performance issues could be down to writing issues, so I was kind of struggling on
Most
how
likely.
to score it in terms of like there are definitely some actors that do better than others.
And boy, there are some lines that props to these people for saying it with a straight face. These ones.
Well, it's anybody in science fiction, fantasy. There's always going to be an actor where you got to be looking at your script going like, I don't even know what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
You know?
It's just a bunch of babble.
What does this even mean? So props to everybody for saying it like you're saying with a straight face. For me, the Harfoots got a little bit grating at times.
they could be a little extra.
My
That's
problem with them was that
interesting.
they were extra, and at the end of the day, I feel like they're just crappier hobbits.
They
Like,
are crap.
They're
They're
hobbits.
proto-
They're proto hobbits.
They're proto hobbits.
but
yeah.
but they're hobbits that aren't mischievous and aren't as big about caring about each other.
Well,
And I'm
but-
like, that's the whole thing that makes the hobbits cool.
Well, no, but that's the whole thing, though. Is like
They gotta
these
learn.
guys, like they are, what's the word that
I don't
you
know.
travel?
nomadic.
Nomadic. There
Yeah,
we go.
yeah.
Migrants.
But yeah, they're migrants, and they're
Sure.
not really. Like this is before the farming era,
They are-
right?
they
They're
are
I
gatherers.
established.
completely understand that.
comfortable.
I just didn't like them as much as I like
Boy,
Hobbits.
we're gonna fight on this one because they're probably my favorite. Some of my favorite stuff in the
Out
thing.
of the whole thing.
Oh man,
Yes.
see,
No,
we're all gonna
absolutely
fight
not.
because
Yeah.
I probably have a different like.
So for me, like Galadriel was the actress that played her did good, but she was a bit one note. Again, I feel like that might be more down to the writing
that's the
than
writing.
her performance.
That's kind of what I wrote down for
or
me.
even the directing, because I
Maybe,
really wonder
yeah.
if sometimes she was just told make this face and she did, and they're like, yeah, that's good, and then it's on screen. I'm kind of like, what's going on here?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
for me, again, I think most of the performances were pretty good across the board. No one stood out as being terrible, you know, like in unlike Wheel of Time, where I can name half the cast and be like, they shouldn't be allowed to be actors
I think-
anymore.
Or Ryan's over here like all the kids.
I think a lot of the
Stank.
Southlanders were kind of tough. Like Bronwyn and Theo were pretty tough for me to watch.
Theo did kind of get on my nerves.
Yeah.
Bronwyn I liked
See,
okay.
Ryan just hates kids.
I mean,
For me,
Confirmed.
kid actors, it's 10 or 2, man. You either nail it and you're incredible, or like get out of here.
I also had a problem with Isildur and his
Friends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were a little
Yeah.
over the top. I
Well,
think.
it felt a little like a CW
yeah,
type
Yeah.
level with them. They were a little bit over the top, but
Eh.
generally though, I gave it a
Everyone
7
did- yeah, it was-
because
everyone
it
did a
was
good job.
pretty good.
hmm
Well, picking up from that with like Isildur and his friends, right? And saying it felt like a CW show.
Yeah.
It's the kind of drama that you expect from like a modern TV show
Kind of,
and not from this kind of fantasy setting.
It is.
Yeah.
And so it kind of graded.
Now you do get I did like their progression of their characters.
Yes.
Through that because you actually see some actual development.
Yes.
Yeah.
And change, which is refreshing.
Yeah.
I personally, I really think for me, the Harfoots were some of my favorite parts, just because I really liked the characters that they were. It was very obvious who was going to be who and how they played and interacted with each other. Like they were all identifiably the same group, but they all played off each other because they were all distinct personalities. And I felt like good chemistry there, right? Like it felt like a group of people who have been like when they're doing the ceremony before they start the next journey where they're, reminiscing
that was
the left behind. Like, yeah, that actually kind of hit. And you see, like they're going through all the Proud Fellows and Poppy's crying because that's her whole family. And it's like, man, like this is brutal.
And I will say that like the bouncing back and forth and going to the Harfoots and stuff, I thought gave
it helped.
It helped a lot.
Yeah.
Not only just because that's getting a bit into plot, but I think with performances of like to go from something that's very serious,
Dark
like the
and serious,
Galadriel
yeah.
stuff, over to the Harfoots, performance wise felt pretty good.
Yeah. For me personally,
What did you give it?
Oh, I didn't give a score, did I? I gave them a 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
I felt like Galadriel, and especially the early episodes was probably the weakest part of the show for not just
general
plot,
performances,
but just performances.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was probably just because what she's being given is terrible. But again, we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
And I know what relationship and chemistry Andrew wants to talk about, so I won't talk there. I'll just piggyback on his. You want to get in?
Yeah, so I also gave it a 7.
Hey, consensus.
And it's pretty much for the same stuff. Like, I felt that Galadriel and Halbrand's, all the Numenor stuff was a little over the top for what I felt fantasy, like what Lord of the Rings kind of would be.
And again, this is probably more plot, but it almost felt like we got too much of that. Like, I didn't need all of these storylines
That is
here.
definitely going to come into plot for me.
Yeah.
So, but honestly, my favorite was Elrond.
Yep.
And I understand he's pretty boy Elrond. That's fine. Everyone can.
So
I'm fine with
weird.
it. I think he looks good. I loved his relationship with Durin.
Him and Durin
Yes.
was the highlight of the show for me.
it was
I want a show that's just that.
I know. Oh, it was fantastic because like it was one of those things too where you get, you're like, oh, elves and dwarves, blah, 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 blah. And then like the second that Durin drops the line of like, it's been 20 years and I've had a whole life. I have kids. And then
I got married.
Yeah. And then you see Elrond's face like, oh no.
Yeah.
This is not like, I feel terrible for this because like, you can definitely tell that they have good chemistry with each other.
Well, and they felt like the realist relationship.
Yeah.
For being as different a character as they are, because that confrontation, right? He's like, what do you have to say for that? And he, Elrond's face falls and he says, congratulations, like, because I've missed all this, right? Like, that's the only thing he can say.
Mm-hmm.
I do, and we looked it up because we were like, man, is this dude's face, like, is this like CGI'd? Because funnily,
No, he just has
he just has a
got a face.
jaw, like, because the last time this happened to us, It was in Wheel of Time, and it was Leandrin. And we were like, boy, she has got the sharpest cheek. Like, you could cut freaking meat on that.
lady.
And we're like, well, this has got to be CGI. We were like, no, she just looks like that. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah. Robert Armeo.
Armeo, yeah.
Is, I mean, yeah, he just has that jaw.
Yeah. Maybe this is more spectacle. I just give him long hair. Don't give him whatever they get. I don't need this 2020 coif-looking thing.
But specifically with Durin and him, like, I also like that the performances they gave in the later episodes when like the ups and downs that their relationship takes over the course of this first season. And like the fact that by the last episode or towards the end, you can see how much they care about each other. And like when Durin goes off on his dad about how like he's like a brother to me, you feel it. You're like, oh my gosh.
That was actually a great scene with him and his dad because, obviously his dad has to be the leader, the stoic guy, and like, the essentially the heel. And Durin is just like pouring his heart out for something clearly that has never happened before in their relationship.
Right.
As a father and son.
Right.
And I also have to say, I really love Disa, his wife.
I was
great.
I was hunting for Sophia Namvete.
Yeah.
Sure. I butchered her name. But yeah, her interactions with Durin are great. And again, it's a relationship that feels real.
Yeah. It feels like it's lived in, like they're actually
They
married.
actually had 20 years of this. They have kids, etc. Yeah.
I think the guy that played Adar did really good too, of being like kind of like this creepy, aloof, corrupted elf,
father of orcs.
The scene with him and Galadriel was really strong.
That was another one where like I feel like the writing was hitting on that scene specifically.
Yeah, because you really get the creep of like she was like, well, "What have they done to you?" And it's like, "I did this."
Yeah,
Well,
and when he was like, "You could have stopped your search for Sauron in the mirror, or your successor to Morgoth in the mirror." It's like, oh, got her.
Yeah, and now another person. This is actually not a good call out. This is kind of it's mostly just due to what they were given, I think. But Charlie Vickers for Halbrand.
He was a little stale.
We could not stop calling him Discount Aragorn.
Discount Aragorn.
I mean, like now, granted, past the reveal, it makes a lot more sense of kind of like his person, like what he was.
Right, and we get into the plot on some of this stuff because the reveal was, I don't know about y'all, it was really obvious what was coming.
No, I mean, it was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty obvious up until, or it was like kind of clouded for like the first half, and then like
it started getting
like, ooh, yeah, this is like definitely what it's going to be.
But his performance to me, like, it also kind of had some of those shades of CW at times.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, the final episode, I thought he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, he did pretty good in the last episode.
Especially like with him
I think once
confronting her.
Yeah, well, especially once he had more, because like when he had more to work with that wasn't just Galadriel.
Yeah.
It helped, because like, so the scene with him on Numenor in the tavern, like that's almost a perfect Matt Cawthon impression too.
I don't know who that is.
Wheel of Time.
Oh, okay.
Not to keep beating the drum here. Which I say that you haven't read the books. You haven't read the books. You have no basis of comparison. He's the scoundrel, the scamp.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was that kind of play of, well, he turns the crowd in his favor and then gets what he wants.
Yeah.
And it still didn't quite work out. But you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Are we done with performance?
I think we're done with performance. Yeah.
I think so, because everything we keep butting into is like borderline plot.
Let's get into
the music. Performance got a 7, y'all. Like it's okay. It's some uneven performances, maybe due to writing, maybe due to directing, maybe due to acting, but overall pretty good.
Yeah.
Score.
Of the score.
Steven, lead off with the score.
Okay, I'm gonna kick this off low.
Okay.
And I will say I debated between an 8 and a 7. And I ended up settling on a 7.
Ooh. I don't know about that one.
It's unfortunate.
I think
continue.
The main theme is good to decent. It's not quite there. My biggest complaint, because y'all are going to gush on this, I know.
Sure.
My
We're
biggest
both ready.
complaint in this was there are so many moments where I was sitting there going, do I need to turn subtitles on? Because y'all are just washing these people out talking with this.
I never had that issue.
Maybe you just need to have a better TV.
Get
On
outta
my
here.
Dolby Atmos surround sound system, I could hear everybody just fine.
On my Sonos surround sound, I had
Oh
no
my
problem.
gosh. All right, guys, let me
Well,
run out.
I am curious. Like, so are you just watching on a soundbar, stereo TV? What are you
It's
doing?
just a TV.
Just
Let
a
me
TV?
Let me go out and drop a
I
couple
know.
grand.
Psychopath. I'm getting lightheaded.
Do you need help?
Oh my gosh. I'm watching it. I'm watching it how most people are watching it, which is just on a TV.
I mean, that's totally fair.
Ryan's never
I'm gonna
coming over
need
to my house.
some hot towels, some water. So yeah, I could see. Well, then you probably have that problem with like every show on earth.
No,
right?
and that's the thing is I don't.
Now
Interesting.
I will say that there definitely were a couple times that we you basically had to have subtitles because their accents are so
Now,
thick.
that's
Yeah,
not really
accents
that's
and
not
weird
a
names are
music.
one thing.
That's not a
Yeah.
music problem.
That's not a music
Yeah.
problem.
But we definitely kept like the volume kept creeping up on the TV
Yeah.
into considerably high enough of a range that when we stopped watching it, when something else we both went, whoa!
It's like blowing you away.
Yeah.
It's like Back to the Future.
Yeah, but I'm like, the music was good. I did feel, especially early, like later episodes, I think the music got much better.
Mm-hmm.
It did feel early on that I felt kind of bad for Bear because it almost felt like he got trapped in this spot of doing an impression of Howard Shore. Because people expect
did,
Lord of the
yeah.
Rings. They expect an impression of Howard Shore, but he's also accomplished. He needs to be able to express himself in
Yeah.
this.
I think he did a pretty good job.
I think it gets a lot better in later, especially because we have more emotional weight in later
Yeah.
episodes, and so then the music can really come in and hit there.
Mhm.
But especially early on, I was much more just like, "Oof!" Is this something? Because I mean, like, Lord of the Rings and Hobbit music is in regular rotation. I listen to it all the time, and I was actually debating: is this stuff gonna make it in? And some of the later stuff definitely will.
Yeah, so I'll definitely say that, like, if I ever had to review the music for just a Lord of the Rings film, it would probably be just a perfect 10 because it's almost like phenomenally
Yeah,
good.
I don't
Yeah,
know
like-
that I could not give it.
Yeah,
a 10.
like-
I'd be really struggling.
And Bear McCreary did a fantastic job at all. I'm not even gonna say an impression, but a motif.
Right.
Like
Well, he's kind of trapped in this in between where it's like, well,
It's
people
a bit
expect
of-
Lord of the Rings.
it's a bit of a lose for
yeah,
him.
yeah, it is. Yes.
And so I gave it an 8.
Okay.
And I gave it an 8 because one, I really did not like the Howard Shore track.
No, it's
it-
my least favorite
It
track.
took
on the
away a
whole
lot
soundtrack.
from me.
Yeah.
And but that's really like there's
So,
a couple.
what you don't know is when Howard Shore was going to make that track, they showed him what they'd already filmed for the intro, and he kept falling asleep.
Yeah, because I mean he's a fantastic composer.
Right.
I just think he just missed on that specific one.
Yeah,
Now the rest of the there are some banger tracks on the soundtrack.
absolutely.
Not even including just like any of like the actual BGM tracks like Numenor or I think it was like the Shuddering Sea, which is really good.
Mhm.
Then but the actual spoken song or the sung songs.
Oh, yeah.
So the Wandering
The one with Fiona Apple.
Yeah. No, not Fiona Apple.
Fiona Apple?
No,
Yeah,
not
not
the
that.
ending song.
Oh, okay.
No, not at all.
You mean the
Don't-
chanting and
Yeah,
stuff?
the
Got it.
well, the non-pot one is fun, but the Wandering
The
song
Poppy
with,
sang or
Like
whatever?
Yeah.
the walking song.
yeah, the
Oh, got
walking
it, got it,
song.
got
It's Wandering Life or something
Yeah,
like
it
that.
Yeah.
did. That one, like,
That
there
one
was
was all right.
nothing in this that hit the way that something like Misty Mountains
Oh,
or
I don't know. That
Into
that
the
song,
West
like,
hits.
I got a little teary-eyed from that song. Like that
It's a
was-
good song. I just don't think it hits the same heights as some of the other sung songs you get in, like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. I mean, like you're never gonna beat the song that Pippin sings.
Yeah, no,
in Return of the King.
and
When
Like,
again-
dude's eating the tomatoes.
yeah.
When he's mutilating these tomatoes, eating them like a psychopath. How Andrew eats breakfast.
But yeah, no, I gave it an 8. I like the soundtrack is really good. It's already in my general rotation.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I'll absolutely listen to it, and I will know that it's Rings of Power.
Yes.
I gave it a 9.
Yeah,
I love this soundtrack. I'm a huge Bear McCreary fan, though, like from way
he
back.
knocked it out of the park.
I disagree. I don't think he was doing an impersonation of Howard Shore. I heard a lot of McCrearyisms in these songs.
Maybe I just haven't heard enough of his stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I don't
plays-
watch like The Walking Dead. So.
Yeah.
So watching The Walking Dead, watching Battlestar Galactica, hearing like a bunch of other stuff he's done for games, like there's a lot of, I felt like this was very much a Bear McCreary soundtrack. And for me, I loved that the songs oscillated so different between the dwarven stuff, the Galadriel stuff, the Harfoot stuff, everything had its own like style.
It's all location specific.
Yeah, and for me, it helped guide where we were was very easily recognizable by the songs, and I think some of the motifs he repeats in other songs, and so there's kind of like some bleed through, even though there's different styles. And like I've had this soundtrack on repeat since we started watching the show.
Yeah,
like I love it. 9.
Yeah, it's great.
9.
All right, so we've been flirting with it all episode. Let's talk about some plot.
Let's get into the plot. Who wants to lead it off?
I want you to start.
Okay, I gave it a 6.
Yeah.
The plot for me was the weakest point, and not because of any overarching
like story
necessarily
choices?
plot points. Yeah, like the story itself is fine. For me, it was the writing was just inconsistent. We've brought that up
there's
a few
some
times.
scenes that were really good and some scenes that were like,
The dialogue in some scenes was just like, wow, that's a good line. Like that was really good. And then again, like specifically when I'm trying to remember what they said exactly. I can't remember it word for word, but it was when the Harfoots were about to go look for the stranger in like the next to last or last episode.
Yeah.
The whole interaction, like I was saying what they were about to say before they said it.
Yep.
And she's like, I've got to go find him. You're not going alone. You're not going alone. It's like, oh my God. And then it was like, I was like, we're all going to die anyways. We're all going to die anyways. I was like, was this written by an AI? And so for me, the writing just was inconsistent. There's some scenes that like, were really well done. Others wasn't. A lot of the characters too kind of resist the call to adventure for too long for me. Like, we know y'all are going to go on this adventure. Yeah. And there was a lot of time for me, pacing-wise, wasted on, like, people waffling or people being too reluctant to be a part of it. That I was like...
Or, like, false starts to the adventure.
False starts, yeah. It's like, just go. We know you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Just
get on with it.
I would have much rather had that time be spent with, like, just a little bit of setup of, like, what the Valar are and how they're important to this world. Because, like, my knowledge of it came from a podcast where they review that stuff. If I was just basing it off of this show, like I asked my brother, like, what do you think the Valar are? He goes, I don't know, like angels, or are they like God? And I was like, see, like based on just what they tell you in the show, you don't have
it's just not enough
to like understand and like where Numenor came from. They don't get into any, which may be like a rights issue, of like what they have access to.
Kind of ish. I don't know. Like Numenor is created. I don't know if it's technically created at the end of the first age or after the first age, because it's a reward for what the people of man did in the fight against Morgoth, right?
Yeah. So it could have been they didn't get into that because of its first stage
possible
stuff.
They're touching on too much of it, right?
The other two things I do want to say is the stakes were kind of low because I know these characters survive some stuff.
Some of them, yeah.
There were too many death fake outs for me where it was like, this person, oh, they're dead. Oh, they're alive. Oh, they're dead. So like
trying to think of some death fake outs.
The mom.
Oh, Bronwyn. She actually should have
almost died like twice.
She should have died at least the second time.
Isildur, they're like, oh, he's dead. It's like, absolutely not. He's in the Lord of the Rings.
It's necessary.
But, so I think that one's forgivable just because it is for the characters themselves.
Sure.
That is a different trial that they have to basically come to terms with. And the fact that they didn't actually reveal that he was still alive in the show I actually like that choice, just because of the fact that even though we as an audience know, I don't. It means more in universe the fact that they just left. Like they're like it's not like, oh, he just walked out of the ashes, an hour later.
Right.
And his dad thought he was dead. Like, no, they're all the way back in Numenor.
So that's going to be a whole
so
thing
that's
in
going to be a
season
whole
2.
different thing.
Which you need, right? Again, we have 5 seasons.
Yeah.
They need more story to fit in here.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, like, we could have this wrapped up in 3.
Yeah. So that's kind of why, like, that specific, like, I don't think that's a fake out. I think that's just more on the lines of that's going to be character development for the characters.
Future seasons.
That's also a risk, too. Obviously, we haven't gotten there yet. We're not in season 2 yet because it doesn't exist. It won't exist until 2024.
I mean, this is a very expensive.
Yeah. Takes a long time to make this movie. So I got one last thing, and then somebody else can jump in. The Harfoots being dumb for plot reasons got grating by the end of it for me. Like when he's about to like try to save the tree, and they're just like, let's get as close to this magic dude that's almost killed us 8 times as we possibly can. And I was like, back up. give this guy room when you see him
room to
doing weird
work.
magic. Like, clearly, it's a threat. Like, you've almost died like 4 times. When she grabs his arm when it's being frozen, I'm like, what are you even doing?
Why would you even touch
Why would
this?
you
Yeah.
like that? That's where the Harfoots got the most grading on me, was when they kept introducing themselves
Oh,
into
come on
danger
now.
for like just, I guess, for me, it felt like cheap drama of like, why are you grabbing this? Like after like the 3rd or 4th time where they put themselves in danger, I was like, okay, I'm done with this.
All I could see in that was fool of a duck.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I
Right.
don't disagree with that, but I also don't think that would be that was not something that bothered me.
Right. It
Yeah.
bothered me.
Yeah, it
Steven?
didn't get on my nerves at all. I also gave plot a 6.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of pacing issues here.
Yeah.
And sometimes kind of the jump back and forth, like we would jump from one place to another, and then we'd ignore the place we left for almost an entire episode,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and we come back to it. And it's like we really needed to not sit in this one location with these smaller pieces of story here for so long. We need to keep these other things. Like
Momentum, like
we
felt
avoided
weird.
the elves and dwarves storyline for a long time.
It was almost like an
Yeah.
episode and a half.
yeah.
And then when they got into it, it was like, yes.
Yeah,
Like, why are we
finally,
all-
yeah.
Why are we all
I just
sidestepping
want
this?
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a hard time not like, jumping in on like, well, in the book or in the, the lore or
Yeah.
stuff like that. Cause there's a lot of choices were made here.
So, but that's the thing though. I think I said the exact same thing on Wheel of Time. And we are not reviewing a comparison between the books
No,
and
we're
the
not.
series. We are reviewing the series that we saw.
It made for some weird, like, and this is a small nitpicky example, right? But like in the first episode, they introduce Elrond and they're like, they're at a meeting for elf lords, so you're not invited because he's half elven. It's
Mhm.
like the people who are half elven are some of the most famous people within. Like he's not just like a lord's lord. He's descendant of a Maiar, like essentially an angel. Like,
Yeah.
is one of his grandparents. Like
Mhm.
the dude is so far above basically everybody else here who isn't Gil-galad, essentially.
Yeah.
For them to kind of throw stuff like that out there, it had that feel of we read the books, like we drank a LaCroix kind of thing. Like there's just a little hint of oh, he's half elven, so they don't like him as much. Like, bro, no, like his father is the whole reason they can even potentially go back to Valinor.
But
Yeah.
see, they don't
Like,
really get into that.
They
in the
can't,
show.
right?
Yeah.
But they do bring up they name drop who his father is, and that is a
Absolutely.
big deal. They
But,
they
like-
don't really go into why.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, like it was not like, oh, well, this one thing cost them a point. It just added up over time where it kept happening.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And like other things of, oh, we have to compact 3,000 years, and yeah, that's fine. Like you chose this yourself,
Yeah.
and I hope you find a way to maneuver it. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it didn't feel like it worked.
hmm
I don't know. I'm trying to think of some of the look over here. I know my other major complaint.
Mhm.
I do not want National Treasure Middle Earth.
Okay.
I do not
What
want
do you
it.
mean?
I mean, like they're following the symbol of Sauron, and now they go to the map and they turn the symbol sideways, and oh my gosh, it matches the map.
Oh.
and now we have the broken sword, and the broken sword plugs into this, and you turn it, and now the valves work in the water. I don't need any of this kind of stuff in Middle Earth, please.
Okay.
I guess that didn't really. Maybe that just didn't register with me.
Yeah,
Or-
that wasn't a blip on my radar.
Yeah,
It,
like
it annoyed me to no end, just kind of constant stuff like that. Some of the other things I'll get into in entertainment. I'll let Andrew pick up.
Sure. So I give it 7
Mhm.
for plot. I thought mostly for the same things. Like there's some pacing issues. I think that it's really weird because I think all the storylines that they told were important to what they were doing for season 1.
Mhm.
But I feel that there was one too many stories that they were telling.
Yeah.
Where it felt like if you removed one of those, then you have so many more options to fill in some of the blanks of like instead of like them basically being all in one episode on the ocean. Oh, we're gonna go up the river. Now we're on horses, and now we're fighting in
Right.
the Southlands.
Yeah.
Those kind of things where like if you just did that the episode beforehand, where like they're
Right.
on the ground.
They're on the way. They're going to be here in time instead of just feeling like they like teleported
Yeah.
on horse,
So,
off
like,
of both
spread it
on
out.
horses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like those kind of things where like that was probably my biggest like, I'll say cinema sin for that of like, come on guys, like you had a whole lot of time in Numenor where you could have just
spent some time getting us here already.
just
Well,
leave like 2 scenes earlier, and then that's all we need.
I do feel like they stayed in Numenor for too long.
I think it was like maybe 1 episode too long.
Yeah.
they were there a while.
Like they could have wrapped that up a lot quicker, I feel like.
Yeah, so like those kind of things were really what kind of knocked it for me.
Mm-hmm.
But the stuff that I did like, though, I really enjoyed the Harfoots. I thought they were fun. And they had lots of personality, right?
Yes,
Mhm.
and we needed that.
Yeah,
I'm not going to lie, we needed that
because they're definitely the only like funny ones besides, I guess, like Durin. But even then, that was much more of an emotional storyline by the end.
Yeah.
Where like you didn't get like the kind of like, oh, the dwarves are quirky and funny because they're just like they just live in a
Right.
mountain. So you get a lot of that kind of stuff. And then I really did enjoy obviously the clear fake out with the servants of Sauron being like, well, you're Sauron to the stranger.
That was so dumb.
Oh yeah, let's get into the last
Dumb.
episode and the big reveal.
Yeah.
There in the plot. If you're done,
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry.
that's fine. Yeah.
I don't want us to gloss over
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Move on to
no,
you're
entertainment.
good.
So like, for me, the reveal that Halbrand was Sauron was like pretty obvious. At least like halfway through the season. About halfway through, I was kind of like. But the first half, I was like, it could be the stranger or it could be
the stranger, could be him.
Halbrand. I thought for a minute, I was like, maybe it is the stranger, and it's
No.
like going to be weird that like
No.
he's learning how to like love, and then all of a
Yep.
sudden he's going to be like, too bad, so sad. Or I thought maybe like, what if
What if I'm evil?
well, I was like, what if somebody like kills the Harfoots and he's like, you know what? Nuke this place. I was like, that would have been interesting.
but now we're just taking, again, one of the most evil people in
Right. Well, he's
fantasy.
just the manifestation.
We've given
of
him a
evil.
reason.
Yeah,
We've
yeah.
given him a reason to be evil.
So
yeah, it's
I
weird.
felt like though that the reveal of it was okay done. Again, I kind of expected it. And when we started that episode, as soon as he's like, "Oh, I'm in the workshop of Celebrimbor," I was like, "Oh, how convenient."
Yeah.
Whoa, what if I should find myself here?
Oh man, what if you took it and made a ring?
Yeah.
What if a circle?
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, like at that point, they were just hitting you over the head with it.
Yeah.
yeah,
I did like the servants of Sauron were pretty interesting though.
yeah. They look like they were in that South African band Die Arntwood.
So I liked the way they looked, right? The costumes were great.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
boy, whoever they found or gave her like contacts or whatever, but man, she looked creepy
She
as
looked
all
creepy,
get out.
yeah.
Super creepy.
And the shape shifting thing where
I
like
like
she
that.
like is
And then it
Nori
changes
and like
the
drops
eyes.
it down in the eye. Yeah, like that
Yeah.
was good. The actual plot of that was dumb.
Yeah,
Just
I guess.
dumb.
I mean, well, it doesn't like it because they're just essentially cultists for
Yeah.
Sauron. They like them like basically making the mistake that they think that he's
It's
him.
kind of funny, but it's
Well,
also a throw off.
Well, it's a throw off, but then it also would kind of make sense too because they don't know what he looks like.
Right.
Yeah, well, he's
But
a
see-
shapeshifter. He can take any form.
Yeah,
at
That's
this
the
point.
thing too. I think that I would have loved if they could have carved out some other storylines and put a little more in there about like
Just a
what
little
they're
bit.
doing and
Mhm.
why they would think this dude
Yeah.
is Sauron, and then
Yeah.
get into it so that when we get to that point, we're not just like, oh, they just think he's that because he fell from the sky, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a few points in the finale or in that ending where I felt like if they could have had just a little more setup in a
Mhm.
previous episode,
like-
it would have made the payoff better.
Yeah. Again, kind of going back to my thing of like if you maybe removed one of the storylines, like
Yeah.
maybe with
Yeah.
the Southlanders, just a little bit to where then you have a little bit more extra time with some of these other like side stories.
So what's funny is like there are a lot of people who objected based on timeline complaints of the Harfoots being in the show, right? Because if we play with lore, you could play that hobbits probably existed in the Second Age; they just weren't known,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and that's fine. Because I was one of these people where I was like, I don't know if I need hobbits, and then like I started watching the show, I was
You're
like,
like,
man, I desperately need this
you need the comedy
storyline.
relief.
But at the same time, it spent so much time kind of playing around with what, to me at least, felt like a really obvious, oh, it's going to be Gandalf. And they're trying to do it as
Yeah.
a fake out,
Yeah.
which also messes up the timeline, again, from books, the timeline of when the Astari actually arrived. 'Cause
Yeah.
he's way early, apparently, right now. Depending on what year they think this is. I don't know. I can't.
I mean, presumably it's towards the end of the Second Age.
I mean,
Right.
well, it has to be just
Right.
because of just how people just get old.
So in the books, when does Gandalf like show up?
1000, the year 1000 of the Third Age.
Okay,
So,
so he's
yeah,
like into the Third
Sauron's
Age.
been
then.
defeated. Yeah, he shows up like a normal person would coming from Valinor on a boat, to the Grey Haven.
Yeah,
which
not
is
like through the sky in a meteor.
not a
Got it,
not
got
a
it, yeah.
random meteor to nowhere.
I mean, I thought the random meteor was pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought it was cool.
It was cool. It was also one of these things where it was like technically this is like an agent of the gods sent down to help. So when he gets there, he doesn't know who he is, where he is, why he is, and can't
he is
talk.
no
like,
help.
Weird. Like and has enough power potentially to just randomly destroy whatever. Like y'all are doing a bang up job, gods.
Well, you know, I mean, that's just kind of part of it sometimes.
Yeah, but the Halbrand as Sauron, I don't know. It felt like as soon as he got to Numenor, it was like, oh, this is obviously going to be him because he's interested in smithing. He's up to no good, right? Steals, gets confronted, should be in a situation like 8-on-1 or whatever, where he should just get beat up, and he turns around and basically just rips the dude's jaw off with his bare hand. And suddenly, like we've gone from he's some like vagabond who is castaway, who has skills way stronger than he should be. And by the time we get towards the end of the show, like, dude's like wearing armor, using a sword, no big deal, riding the horse. Like, okay, you something else. Like, you can't just be.
For me, I thought like where they did a decent job of trying to misdirect you away from that was with the he didn't want to go to Middle Earth.
Yeah,
Galadriel convinced him. I mean,
well,
you can debate how effective that was, but for me, I was like, oh, well, maybe he's not Sauron.
Again, this is the problem with having some knowledge of the books and the lore is where Sauron really makes his mark is Numenor.
Yeah, is in Numenor.
Is
well,
where
so
he wants to
I
be.
thought it was actually basically the advisor, the vizier or whatever.
Pharazôn?
Yeah. Like, I thought it was actually him for a decent amount just because I'm like, well, I know that Sauron, like, basically makes his name in Numenor. And that, like, he's part of the reason why it falls.
He is the reason.
Well,
but he's
like,
the instigator. I don't know if you want me to give that away. I don't think y'all want me to throw that out here right now.
I mean, but
because they may cover it in future seasons.
It has to be like if they want to fill in these episodes, some of what's going to happen has to be in there. So
so that's kind of the thing is like I actually thought it was him because I know that like in lore he was more of like a politician kind of, not a politician, but like he was integral into like Numenorian like government.
Yes, I mean he's the nephew of the king.
Yeah,
and he's a big part, and he will be a big part going forward. Like just outright, if they're going to tell this story, he's going to be a figure for at least another season or two.
Yeah,
easy. What else do we have? Are we entertainment?
Yeah,
I think so. Well, okay, so real quick, what did y'all think of Galadriel's storyline? Galadriel.
I thought it was pretty weak.
They did not do her any service with our first 2-episode introduction of we're going through the bitter cold, and I'm your leader, and I'm just going to leave you behind because you've fallen down. Like, you're a terrible leader. This is a tough spot to recover from.
I liked it to a degree. I just feel like it was like...
I thought it got a lot better at the end.
Towards the end,
yeah. Whenever, especially whenever she realizes how much she messed up.
Yeah, that was when it was like...
And then you're like,
she actually started, by the time we got to the last 2 episodes, she had a turn, and you can see some glimmering of the being the beacon of wisdom that she is by the time we get to Lord of the Rings, right? I think they had a missed opportunity, and this is like a plot issue, maybe, of early on, right? She's the military leader. She's really determined, bound and determined everything. And it wasn't until episode 7 that we drop that her husband has been missing.
Yeah.
If they had dropped that earlier, then it
gonna give a little bit more emotional weight,
right? And like her decision at essentially the gates of Valinor to not go. Like, if we know that her husband could still be out there, then suddenly there's way more weight to these kind of choices, and her being so driven and we won't stop. Again, you can justify this a lot more easy. Of my husband, we're elves. My husband's been missing for a couple hundred years. He could still be alive, and I've been looking. That's part of this. The reason either I'm avenging him or I'm finding him and rescuing him.
Yeah,
right?
that's my drive.
Yeah,
I feel like that would have punched it up a lot better.
A way more understandable emotion. Because for most of this, I was like, well, I guess Celeborn's just not a thing. And I had that moment of, are we gonna marry Elrond and Galadriel? Because that's all kinds of messed up.
Because she's his mother-in-law, right?
Yeah. So, if we get into the
the actual lore.
The actual lore. Well, theoretically, right? This is supposed to line up with Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna line it up, then we need Galadriel and Celeborn to have a daughter for Elrond to marry.
Yeah.
To have Arwen.
So do you think that it's because these showrunners are inexperienced is why it was kind of inconsistent?
I don't know. And
like props to them for this being your first show as showrunners.
Yeah.
Like they did great, but at the same time, like I guess I'm just surprised that with as good as the visuals are, and to me how good the music was,
The plot was still a little wonky.
Shaky.
it's the one place where I was
Yeah.
like, and I'm not even
Well-
mad about being true to the books because I've never read them.
Yeah.
It's more of a just like I don't know if like more experienced showrunners could have like guided this
Elevated
to
it a little
better
bit different.
Yeah,
Well, I think the real challenge is, again, they're dealing with huge time compression, right? They have to cover thousands of years. So you have to pick and choose what happens when. Like, you can't go in the order it does.
Well, and that's kind of the
Book-wise.
big problem with, I'll say Tolkien's general idea that elves just essentially can't die.
They are immortal, yes.
Yeah, and because of that, you have because you have these immortal beings, you have to write around the fact that they're living for so long that it just kind of you kind of like wrote into your own Deus Ex Machina at that point. Because like at some point they're just so smart and they have so much knowledge that like in theory they shouldn't make any mistakes.
You're basically infallible, right?
yeah.
Well, and that's entertainment, but we'll get there, I guess.
Let's just go ahead and get into
entertainment. Who wants to go first?
You.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Okay. I gave it. I waffled really hard. 7.6, 7.6. I gave it a 7.
Okay.
Where I ended up. I can make some we can go into like lore whatever stuff, and that's fine. That's its own little world. I do think that they faced a lot of challenges in condensing this and getting stuff back into its own order. And honestly, Second Age, outside of the timelines that Tolkien wrote, is pretty barren. There's not a whole lot. Like there is no plot. There's no narrative you can go to and say, well, we're going to adapt this story. So they are almost completely on their own for this.
They are.
And so that certainly hurt them.
for better or for worse.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there is canvas to be worked with here, but I don't know about y'all. You have the big blank Word document with the cursor blinking at the top. Like that's hard.
Yeah.
So they definitely had some challenges here, and we already hit on it. Like I think one of the biggest things that they could have done to really make Galadriel feel like a
Galadriel.
oh my god,
The way you say it sounds like a cold medicine.
Galadriel.
I hate because it feels like we're in the show. We're just talking like normal, which is what they did. It's like Galadriel.
Galadriel.
But they could have made her much more understandable and sympathetic
Yeah.
if we had just gotten the husband thing early.
Because she was just basically mad the whole time.
She's just kind of a jerk. And also, was it episode 3 where we have the storylines where Galadriel is on Numenor and Arandir is captured by the orcs? I
Yeah.
think it's episode 3. I at some point in that episode, I turned to Lauren and was like, this episode title should just be "Elves Are the Worst Prisoners Ever." It's like y'all are like none of y'all have an idea of how to be like lay low. Like you lived for thousands of years. You'd think you'd understand the concept of lay low for a week or two, and then we can escape or whatever.
Yeah.
Or like you come in here and you just immediately like, I'm big, I'm bad, I'm in charge, and it's like you're like you're
Maybe no elf has ever been captured.
yeah,
There's no book on
right?
it.
Like, they
We're
don't
in
know
uncharted
they don't
territory
know
here.
what to do.
Well, basically, all the orcs that were, or all the elves that were captured turned into orcs.
Well, it's like they said
Yeah.
they didn't have a word for death until,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't have a word for like escape or capture. What do we do? I don't know what to do.
But there were some things kind of hitting on the capture where we kind of dipped into the Legolas pool of like, oh wow, like you are so physically capable beyond everything else. Why are you even captured?
I mean,
Yeah.
he was definitely like, see, this is the problem when you have immortal beings that can see far, hear far.
Like they have so many advantages.
Like they have so many advantages. There's no way that he, in theory, should have been caught like basically
easily,
snuck up on, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like
It threw me. I won't lie.
that is just a problem of Tolkien writing and not the story itself.
Well,
Because at some point, like someone has to forget that they have.
It's
a superpower.
not
Yeah.
a problem of Tolkien writing because in his writing, we were never elves like we never got elves' perspective. We were always the hobbits looking up at the elves.
Yeah.
And then they can be these superpowered beings because it's the hobbits that get captured, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a problem with the actual story approach of, well, we need to tell us from the elves' perspective.
multiple perspectives.
Well, how do you have them make mistakes and it still feel like they're elves? Because there are a lot of scenes where it's like, this could just be two humans arguing and I'd buy it,
Yeah.
So there were issues. It's not like it was bad. I didn't sit there and be like, man, I hate this or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
Andrew?
I gave it a
Ryan?
9.
Woo!
I
Spicy.
I loved pretty much the whole show. Like it was always like I genuinely like wanted to sit down and watch it,
Mhm.
which especially for like an hour and 10-minute episode, once every week, like that is a hard sell when I'm already watching so many other shows,
Mhm.
not even including the stuff that we do for the podcast. And then so like me taking out my, a chunk of my time for an hour something on episode
Mhm.
is, I mean, like that's already a pretty big jump.
Right.
And I just like the music was great, the visuals were fantastic. I just love being back in Middle Earth.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
that was my favorite part is it felt like Lord of the Rings. It felt like just an extension of what I already loved.
And that's absolutely fair because there are a lot of scenes and sequences where you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
like this is what I
yeah.
want.
Oh man, when like just like the full line of all the horses in armor riding across that plain.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, just that shot. I'm like, oh yes, give me more horses in armor, please.
Ironically, I was a little annoyed at that shot because
course you were.
It was the reverse of the Ride of the Rohirrim where they're like in single file instead of an actual
They're running
like,
backwards.
broad charge.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we're gonna be like we got thousands of us and we're gonna run in here 2 at a time. I know you had to cross a bridge, but it was one of these things where it's like this feels like the scene, but it also feels weird.
Yeah, well, it's just a really pretty shot, and
It
like,
is, yeah.
I love.
The scenery is just
fan of horse
chef's kiss.
armor.
Also, I have to.
He likes
I-
horses in armor.
No, okay, so I have to also say too,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a core belief difference between the showrunners of the original Game of Thrones and this show.
Mhm.
They killed a horse in Game of Thrones. They almost killed. They
hurt.
hurt a horse in this one.
They also absolutely tripped the crap out of a
and
horse.
and
Yeah.
and then they show the
What?
horse get back up and walk away.
They did. They made sure, although that was actually the scene itself was an issue of all 3 of them left from the same point.
Yeah.
And then somehow this dude
We're-
met
we're
them from
gonna-
the front. But
Oh, yeah.
he's Sauron, so we accept it. He just did whatever he needed to do to get out in front of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
So he could, whoop, whoop, and,
Yeah.
just
He used the dark speech to speed
Yeah.
that horse,
horse up.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would,
but that's the thing is like from that perspective,
Mhm.
you didn't kill the horse. Thank you.
well, and they also have the other horse, Isildur's horse,
Mhm.
hurt, but it's not like in threat. And it, based on the end of the show, maybe it's going to go help
Yeah.
or whatever. So it's much more respectful.
Mhm.
It's much less of a grimdark view of wars that
Yeah. Well, and I'll definitely say this too is what I really liked, and maybe this is just because Tolkien writing and I grew up on a horse farm with that kind of stuff, but he genuinely loved horses.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a guy who fought in World War I and
Yeah.
experienced the horrors of battlefield, a battlefield where there are a lot of horses that died.
Yep.
Like this was his experiences. He was
Yeah.
in the Battle of the Somme. So
Yeah. So I'm just glad that they didn't kill the horse.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, showrunner. You
That's a
you did
9.
good. Yeah.
that's 1 point right there. 1 whole point.
Nice. I gave it a 7.
Yeah.
I liked it. I enjoyed it. I feel like obviously it was gorgeous. I don't want to repeat everything. I think the Elrond Durin stuff is definitely my favorite
Yep.
part of the show. I just wish it had been a little more consistent. There were a lot of scenes that I guess the way I would describe it is it's like that trope, like when Theo is like sneaking through the orc camp
Yeah.
in the wells. He's like, I think I'm past him. I was like, there's a dude around the corner.
Yeah, it's kind of like guy here. Yeah.
Like, and then they grab, and it's like, and then when he's on the ground about to get killed, and like somebody's about to save
Stab
him. It's
him,
probably
yeah.
around here, and
Yep.
then he saves him, and he's like, oh, and I'm like, that kind of stuff. It felt more like network TV, like CBS,
Yeah.
NBC, kind of like the stuff that they
It's
really.
just, it's fake drama.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
the fake drama always takes me out. That's why I only watch prestige TV. No, I only
You watch
watch stuff on
elevated
like
TV.
Well, I just over the past like 10 years, I've got to where I just watch Netflix, HBO, things like that. I
Well,
don't watch a lot of stuff on NBC, CBS
Because
they have to dumb everything down. Characters say what they're thinking instead
Mm-hmm.
of just using their face to emote, and
Mm-hmm.
then stuff like that happens where it's like this fake out of like I've made it past, and I'm like, oh no, you
You obviously have it. Yeah.
you obviously have it. And for me, there were just a few moments like that. That's just the litmus test of like, or that's a symptom of the bigger problem, I think, with the show is
it
it's
is.
perfectly enjoyable, but
Mhm.
it keeps it from hitting those heights for me that are just like, this is a transcendent, piece of media.
The biggest thing that I like, what I would knock it for if I just didn't really just love Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
was the fact that like there are a lot of, it didn't feel like there were characters that were in danger.
There's a problem in this show with
or the
stakes and
only
danger.
characters who were in like actual death danger, basically, I didn't know anyone's name who died. And like there were a couple of scenes where they showed someone dying and it was kind of like slow and dramatic, and I'm supposed to care about this. I don't like, other than you were the other dude that walked into the town with Aranger, I don't even know your name, bro. Like,
Yeah.
like
Well,
I
and
don't
when
feel anything for this.
When Isildur's friend is underneath the thing
The
and
shed,
lifted
yeah.
up, I was like, oh, the pudgy kid. Like I didn't know his name.
Yeah, I don't know these people's
I didn't know his
names.
name, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah, that was also pretty rough.
He's not even that pudgy. It's just the only
Yeah.
descriptor I could come up with. To
It's
be
just like Isildur's standing there and he's like a broomstick, so like this dude's pudgy by comparison.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
But there were a few deaths that just felt like none of our main
Whatever.
cast or none
Yeah,
of the
Yeah.
and that's kind of the thing is like you need to have stakes for your characters, and if the stakes are not death, then you need to have
It's
emotional
gonna be
stakes.
emotional stakes. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have a good portion of our cast already that we know don't die.
Yeah.
They have
So
to like they have to make it the thousands of years at
Yeah.
this point. Yeah.
I think any prequel has that problem.
They do.
And so like for me, it's like we know the Southlands are going to become Mordor.
Yeah.
So like when it happens,
They already
it's not,
kind of are, but
it's not like oh gosh, you mean the mountain exploded? Yeah, obviously. Where do you think Mount Doom comes from? That's
Yeah.
going to happen. Like,
Yeah. At
and-
some point we have to have this ring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And so any prequel story is going to have that uphill battle of like
Mhm.
making you
Mhm.
worried about characters that survive, or
Yeah.
concerned about the outcome of this area that is going to just fall apart and become Mordor.
Well,
So it's they have to make the journey to get to that point really interesting. And I
Yep.
think this show did to a degree. It was very fun to watch, but it
Mhm.
definitely didn't have enough to me. Didn't do enough with that journey to the points we already know things
Yeah.
are going to
Didn't
make
have the
it
wow
just like
factor.
incredible.
and
Yeah.
that is completely fine. And
Yeah.
I'd also add too, it's totally fine if you watch this show and you absolutely hated it because you are a Tolkien scholar and you love
yeah.
every single thing about lore, and that's totally fine. But it's also, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad show.
No, and a big point here versus say like Wheel of Time, right? Which
Yeah.
we again, if you haven't listened to our review on that and you're interested, go back
Wheel
check
of
it
Time
out.
is objectively a terrible show.
Right. It contradicts the books, and that's okay if you're making an adaptation. But then once you get to the point where you contradict yourself within your own internal logic, that is a major
it's a
problem.
huge issue.
Yep.
And we
Yeah.
did not have that moment here.
Mhm.
No, I think they did pretty good with their own internal logic.
Their own
Yeah,
internal
everything.
world. I mean, other than just kind of the idea of it feels really small, like people are just getting places like nobody's business,
Yeah.
which that's fine because at some point all these events take place at different places. You have to get them somewhere. You can't just be like, well, hop on your friendly Eagle transport, let's go. You
Yeah.
know, like that's just gonna be weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, outside of that, there's not a whole lot where I could just be like, oh, they're just butchering. I mean,
Yeah.
there are some.
I mean, like, they're likely,
choices, but-
because, like, I only have so much lore knowledge, but, at the end of the day, I'm sure that they're butchering so many things.
There are
and-
some
but it-
absolutely bizarre choices that were made that are like lore related.
Yeah.
But it's kind of whatever. It's just we live with
But
it.
at the
I
end
still
of the day,
feel
like,
like
who
they-
cares?
They might be setting up for something in season 2
Some
or
kind of
3
bait
that
and
we
switch.
don't know.
And we don't know. It's
Yeah.
not complete yet, right?
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of the thing is like at the end of the day, like if you find it entertaining, that's good. If
Yeah.
you didn't, that's also okay.
Okay. So what about we season 1's done, right?
Yep.
We've seen it all. What are your expectations? What do you think we're gonna get in season 2?
I think they're going to forge a lot more rings.
Well, they have
They
to.
have they're kind of missing a few. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're going to forge a lot more rings. I guess like we'll see Sauron like slowly descend into being like a really, really bad person, right?
Yeah,
Well,
because like right now you don't really know what his motivations are because he was trying to like, in his mind, like
in his own flawed way,
in
like
his own flawed way,
fix
like,
stuff,
Yeah.
like unifying everybody.
Well, what I think is going to be for me the interesting storyline that's here, right? That's not something that I have any way of knowing how it goes, or I have an idea of how it has to end. But
Mhm.
is we have Arda, right? Orc father.
Yeah.
He's the one that made that
Adar?
land.
Is it Adar?
Adar.
Adar.
Whatever his name is. Adar. Whatever his name is. I don't care. Orc father.
Yeah.
Creepy elf.
Yeah.
He's the one that made this land what it is.
Yeah.
Right? And now Sauron is the one returning to it. Well, he is not the position of power, right? Because
Yeah.
this other guy is kind of trying to be like he's actually trying to be a father to the or like create their own land, give them names, make them people because they were presumably we're following this lore. They were elves.
So you think his storyline is wresting power away from Valar?
Right. Now we have a conflict here of two sources of quote unquote evil.
Yeah.
Where they're going to be fighting over the control of the land, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a whole separate story that we can look at and take place.
Yeah. And so I'm pretty sure I would assume that probably the next season is probably going to hit on the downfall of Numenor.
Well, if you want to follow it lore-wise, that requires moving Sauron around.
It does, because he's already in Mordor.
He's at Mordor now, yeah. So you have to get him all the way back from there back to Numenor.
Unless there's some way for, he has, magic. And
he does.
Because it's a cataclysm for them.
It is, but it's precipitated by their choices.
Yeah.
It's not something where it's like, oh, we opened the wrong lock or whatever. Oh, it turns out this drain is how the island flows. It's not one of those. Uh-oh, shouldn't have pulled that out.
Now, I definitely, in my mind, I have no idea where.
I would love that if that was like.
No.
I have no idea where they're going with Gandalf and Nori.
Well, they're going to the east, and there's not a lot about the east in the Tolkien writings, right?
Well, they are already in the east. Like they are already in uncharted land.
Okay.
Usually.
They probably did that for a reason, so they could do whatever they want.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. I'm not entirely like it's one of those things where like now that where everyone is like, yeah, this is Gandalf. Now you want to like, it's like, do I need to see more?
Yeah,
right.
Well, they were going east. I didn't catch that.
I think that's what they said.
Yeah, they said they're going
I thought
east.
because I thought they were going west, but I don't know. Presumably,
Remember, always follow your nose.
We'll get a map, and they'll do dotted lines on. We'll get to see where they go, which I greatly appreciate, even though I didn't like the
title cards.
Places. Yeah, I don't do it once.
So the only title card that bothered me was at the end when it went from Southlands
to
Mordor.
Yeah, that was super
incredibly
cheese.
dumb.
What is this?
Yeah,
that was the one time where I was like, well, why?
Yeah,
What a choice that was.
That was a very poor choice.
Yeah, that was rough.
Again, I feel like that's dumbing it down for like people who either didn't see Lord of the Rings and came into this cold, or like. It felt weird.
Yeah, because like it's a big mountain it's a volcano.
It's a volcano.
We know,
it's Mordor.
Volcano.
Yeah, we know that it's Mordor. There's only one.
So we have
New Jersey.
We have
like what?
Newark. Oh no,
no.
We have presumably Gandalf and Nori. Right.
Yeah.
We have that storyline. We have our Sauron returns to Mordor storyline.
Yep.
We have something to do with the rings.
With
Beleriand,
Galadriel and
Region,
Elrond,
and Celebrimbor.
But then you also have like obviously the upheaval of what's going to happen with Durin and his father.
We also saw the Balrog.
Yeah,
they already.
The Balrog is already way too early in lore. That's fine.
Oh boy. There's
like 2 or 3,000 years early.
I was wondering about that.
But
do they put it back?
It may not
asleep?
be the same Balrog.
It's
more
hard.
than one Balrog.
It's hard to say that though because we have people alive right now who have to be alive at the end of the Second Age.
Yeah,
who don't live that long.
Yeah,
right. In Elendil and Isildur, right? Like they live longer than human lifespan, but we're only getting into like the 200, 300 years here.
Yeah.
We're not like you don't have long to go here.
Yeah, because like just as an example, Aragorn is like 80 something odd.
He's
years.
80 in Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
But yeah, so like we have to have the final alliance of elves and men, like within a couple seasons. I mean, with them still alive.
Honestly, right. if that's our like final season, like our whole final season is like the last alliance and like the battle on Dagorlad and stuff like that. Like, let's go. Like, we'll get there.
Presumably, that's what it is.
Right? It has to be. You would think.
Yeah.
Well, unless they do it like halfway through, and then it's stuff with Isildur and him like kind of like being corrupted by the ring.
Well, he doesn't. That's not really.
Well, he doesn't really get corrupted.
He gets betrayed by the ring.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's still the same thing.
Kind of, yeah. But like you have Third Age stuff there, yeah.
But
you could go past.
I am worried with them revealing that a Balrog already exists. That like I don't know what they're gonna do because like that's supposed to be like this is supposed to be like the golden age of the dwarves because Mithril is found and that kind of stuff. Like, so it's like a very large age of prosperity, and he's like in the chamber that they found that has all the mithril.
Maybe I hope what they're doing is not trying to do some memberberry stuff where it's like, don't you like the Balrog? We'll have a Balrog. I hope what they're trying to do is just set up that, like, hey, in a lot of hundreds of years, this Balrog is going to be the one that destroys things. Maybe they don't even get into it in the...
Oh, boy. Yeah, so Balrog pops up third age, almost 2000.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, like thousands of years.
Deep in the third age.
But
I couldn't remember
it's not
exactly
like he doesn't
when.
exist in the second age, right?
No, he's existed since before.
Like,
so that's what I'm saying.
The
Like,
years
maybe
of the
they're
trees,
just showing that, like, hey, just really hitting you over the head with, like, this is where they dig too deep.
Yeah.
And they get to the
but
Balrog
it's not
eventually.
It's not very far, though, because he dropped the leaf in there and the Balrog burned it. Like,
I mean, it went for a while. It went through a lot of nooks and crannies. It's pretty deep.
He's snug. He's real snug in there.
Yeah, but, you know, his time scale of hibernation could be, thousands of years.
Yeah.
And, he could just want to ignore them.
I'm giving him a pass on that one because I just think that maybe, like, they're setting up that this is the Balrog.
Yeah.
That eventually, when they dig too deep, he's going to be the one that,
I think, honestly, I think they're going to compress it because we already, again, like I said earlier, if we play with the lore game, Gandalf shouldn't be here until 1003rd age.
Yeah.
Well, that's only another 1,000. Like, this is not that big a leap to just go ahead and say, well, Gandalf's already here. Let's get the Balrog into play. And maybe that's maybe it's like the dwarves and the elves, ally and try to, like, seal off the minds. Yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the third time that Amazon has made a series off of existing material. So we have Wheel of Time, which was a bad adaptation.
We have disaster.
Rings of Power, which is honestly, I think this has been a good adaptation.
If it's not necessarily a good adaptation, it's at least a good show.
Yeah.
Right.
And so then we have The Expanse, which, like, I don't know if either of you have seen.
Hold on now.
Now,
you can't give Amazon all credit, right? Sci-Fi had that for a couple of years, a couple of seasons before. They were already the gutters, what are they? The bumpers. The bumpers were already laid. They couldn't go into the gutter because the bumpers were already there. Yeah.
But they, like, for The Expanse, they changed a pretty large portion of the source material.
Mm-hmm.
To like.
But now, was that already sci-fi? Was that already baked in with sci-fi? Because I know they changed, like, basically your big bad was a decision by sci-fi how it looks and how it works.
Amazon was what, seasons
4, 5, and 6.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was like there was a couple wheels in motion, but then they hit it even harder in 4, 5, and 6.
They did. I mean, they did a good job with it.
Yeah, and they did a fantastic job with it, and
with a much better budget.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where I think when we're looking at Rings of Power moving forward to more seasons, I definitely feel that they will likely fall into a good rhythm, and it's going to hit its stride because the first episode, or I'll say the first season of a lot of shows, is always going to be a little rocky because you're having to do character motivations, you're having to do character introductions, you have to set the stakes. And now that we know what the stakes are and we know where all the major players are, now we can get into our real story.
So season 2, they can just go.
Yeah.
And like we have a lot of threads laid, right? We have Galadriel and Galadriel. I hate you all. And Celeborn, right? We have her finding her husband.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of material, and they've laid the initial starting points for all of them. So yeah, there's a lot to work with.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see how it goes. I wish it wasn't 2 years, but whatever.
It has a long break.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a decade before the show wraps up.
Oh yeah. Well, all right. Well, speaking of a decade before the show wraps up, I do believe that is all the time we have for this episode. Before you go, though, if you would take a moment, leave us a like, comment, share,
review.
Leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice.
Preferably iTunes.
Especially iTunes.
Preferably
we love the iTunes. But, if you can't support on Patreon, which we would love, but if you can't, we always love a review, a like, a share, a comment.
Mm-hmm. Share it with your friends.
Tell your friends about it.
Tell your mom about this podcast.
Join the Discord. We love to talk. We love to have just random discussions about stuff we're watching, not even that's going to be on the podcast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's always a good time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So check it out. Check it all out at the website, spoilersintendedpodcast.com. But this is all the time we have for this episode. So until next time, I'm Steven.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Ryan.
And every spoiler was intended. There's so
like
many names.
one group of elves saw the tree, stayed. One group of elves saw the tree and said, I'm good, came back. One group of elves tried to go see the tree and didn't make it. One group of elves said, I don't even want to go see this
I don't
tree.
want to go there. Yeah.